Chapter 217. Don't think too much. Gu Yanhao touched her head. I've asked someone to call the Song family. They'll be here soon. Okay, Song Wuyo replied indifferently. You don't seem to be paying attention. Gu Yanhao looked at her. No, I just feel that Song Jume died too quickly. Gu Yanhao felt the same. Based on my understanding of Song Jume, she's not the kind of person who messes around outside. She has high standards and likes you. Why would she mess around with other men? When he heard that Song Jume liked him, Gu Yanhao was very unhappy, and his eyes became deep. Song Jume died as soon as the news that she had syphilis came out. Also, the decay in her body is very abnormal. Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows. You mean, Song Jume was killed? Song Wuyo nodded. Yes. But the bodyguards at the door said that no one had come into contact with Song Jume. The bodyguards at the door also need to rest. They need to eat, drink, and poop, right? Song Wuyo said. Those who want to harm her will definitely have a chance to get close to her. Gu Yanhao narrowed his eyes. After thinking about it, he felt that Song Wuyo's words were not unreasonable. His eyes darkened, and a hint of shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be him? 10 minutes after Gu Yanhao, Song Wuyo, and his bodyguards left the factory, Mrs. Song and Song Gonghua appeared in front of the factory building. As soon as they got out of the car, they ran into the factory and shouted for Song Jume. They searched one workshop after another, floor after floor. Finally, Mrs. Song found Song Jume in a small room. Ah! Mrs. Song screamed when she saw Song Jume lying on the ground with her body rotten. She covered her mouth tightly with both hands, and her eyes widened in horror. She looked at the body on the ground in disbelief. Her body trembled, and her heart stopped beating. Song Juyue heard her scream and rushed over. When he saw the corpse lying on the ground, he felt as if he had been hit in the head with a stick, and his head suddenly exploded. The Song family was in a state of mourning. Song Nan refused to believe that Song Jume had died of syphilis. Hence, they invited a forensic doctor and concluded that Song Jume had indeed died of an illness. Syphilis. Mrs. Song had always been proud of her 2 daughters. Now that Song Jume had passed away because of syphilis, she was sad. Because it was syphilis, the body was quickly cremated and no one attended the funeral. Song Jume's death brought great grief to Song Nan and the others. However, what made Song Nan feel even more pain was that the rumors of Song Jume's death from syphilis were spreading like wildfire, directly affecting the Song Corporation's stock price. In just 3 days, the company's funds flowed like water. There was only outflow and no inflow. Very soon, there was a shortage of cash flow. The bank began to refuse to lend to the Song enterprise. Song Nan had no choice but to turn to Gu Yanhao. Currently, he needed 500 million yuan. As long as he had 500 million yuan, he would be able to sustain the company. On this day, he came to Gu Yanhao's office. Coincidentally, Song Wuyo was drinking soup in his office. Seeing Song Wuyo around, Song Nan was happy. With her around, things should be easier to handle. Song Nan did not beat around the bush. He went straight to the point and told Gu Yanhao why he was here. After Gu Yanhao, who was sitting in his office chair, heard Song Nan's words, his perfect lips curled up into a faint smile. His eyes were as dark as the stars and as deep as an ancient pool. No one could guess what he was thinking. Chapter 218. His expression made Song Nan very anxious. Although Gu Yanhao was smiling, his smile made people shudder. Ah ho, only you can save the Song enterprise now. Song Nan looked at Gu Yanhao bitterly. No. Gu Yanhao said lightly. What? Song Nan was shocked and looked at Gu Yanhao in disbelief. No, no. How could a son-in-law treat his father-in-law like this? Song Wuyo, who was sitting on the sofa and drinking soup, was also stunned. She looked up and glanced at Gu Yanhao. Then she continued to drink the soup as if nothing had happened. Sister Song's soup was delicious. In addition, she wanted her body not to be so weak, so her appetite was particularly good. Even if I lend you 500 million, you can't save the Song enterprise. It's better not to lend it. Gu Yanhao looked at Song Nan with a faint smile. It can be saved. Song Nan promised. As long as you lend me 500 million, I will definitely restore the Song enterprise to its original state. The stock price will definitely rise. After a pause, Song Nan gathered his courage and said, 500 million won't do. You can lend me 1 billion, 1 billion. Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows and looked at Song Nan sharply. How much do you spend a year? Song Nan was stunned. He didn't know why he suddenly asked him this. He answered truthfully, I spend 3 million a year. How old are you this year? 56. Why did he ask this? 1 billion is enough for you to use for 30 years according to your current spending level. Song Nan was speechless. Gu Yanhao smiled faintly. And you will retire at this age. Why don't you close the Song enterprise and enjoy your old age at home? Song Nan's face changed when he heard this. He looked straight at Gu Yanhao. So, you won't lend it to me? If I lend you 500 million and can't save the Song enterprise, won't it be a waste? Gu Yanhao spread his hands and smiled mysteriously. Ah ho, my dad and your grandpa were brothers who went through thick and thin together, but my dad doesn't have a close relationship with you. Gu Yanhao suddenly interrupted Song Nan. Song Nan's expression darkened further. Gu Yanhao realized that Song Wuyo was looking at him. He turned his head and looked at her with a smile in his eyes. Finish drinking. Song Wuyo put the soup on the coffee table in front of her and nodded. Okay. Gu Yanhao said, just leave the soup here. I'll get Secretary Zhang to wash it later. Song Wuyo, okay. Enjoy as much as you can. Wuyo, Dad's company needs a large amount of cash flow. Can you? Song Nan turned to look at Song Wuyo. Although he didn't finish his sentence, his meaning was obvious. Can I speak for you to my husband? Song Wuyo smiled. Gu Yanhao's eyes flashed. Although she was always cold to him, he felt very comfortable when she called him husband so smoothly. He looked at her with a faint smile, curious if she would speak for Song Nan. You also know that Jumei's incident greatly affected the Song enterprise. Now the shareholders are arguing every day. Because of Jumei's departure, your mom's stomach hasn't recovered yet. What does it have to do with me? Song Wuyo suddenly said coldly. Song Nan froze and looked at Song Wuyo in surprise. She's not my mom. Song Wuyo looked at Song Nan coldly. She has never treated me as a daughter. Why should I acknowledge her as my mom? But I'm your dad, Song Nan said anxiously. Song Wuyo smiled coldly. So what? Do you think Auntie Song is cruel to Song Nan? Chapter 219. Song Nan felt as if someone had slapped him in the face. He was both embarrassed and angry. Now was not the time to lose his temper, so he could only swallow his anger. Now that he was in front of Gu Yanhao, he didn't dare to shout at Song Wuyo. Wuyo, it was all Dad's fault in the past. Song Nan lowered his attitude and admitted his mistake to Song Wuyo. Song Wuyo's eyes were calm as she looked at him quietly. The memories left by the original owner of the body suddenly surged in her mind. The memories were like huge waves, spinning crazily in her mind. Song Wuyo looked at Song Nan and asked, "When I was 7 years old, I had a high fever for 2 days. Yang Yuhui didn't let you take me to the hospital, so you really didn't. Later, the butler secretly took me to see the doctor. Do you know what the first thing the doctor said when he saw me?" Song Nan was a little embarrassed at the mention of the past. He pursed his lips and looked guilty. "It's all Dad's fault for being too busy and neglecting you." Then, what did the doctor say? The doctor pointed at the butler and scolded him. He said that if he had taken me 1 night later, I would have been burned silly and become an idiot. Song Wuyo played it down. When Gu Yanhao heard this, he looked at Song Wuyo with deep and loving eyes. "Wuyo, it's all Dad's fault for not caring enough about you." Song Nan looked guilty, but he thought in his heart, why didn't he burn her into a fool and turn her into an idiot earlier? If she had become an idiot, the one sitting in Mrs. Gu's position would have been his precious eldest daughter. Song Wuyo sneered and looked at Song Nan with an extremely sharp gaze. Not concerned enough. Song Nan felt a chill down his spine. What an unfilial daughter. What kind of daughter would look at her father like that? Yes, yes, yes. Song Nan didn't know how to respond to Song Wuyo, so he could only nod repeatedly. You never cared about me at all. What did he mean by not caring enough? Song Nan felt a pair of clear and sharp eyes staring at him. His back stiffened, and he smiled at Song Wuyo embarrassedly. It's all because Daddy is usually too busy. That's right. You're usually too busy. You're so busy that you only remember your 2 daughters when you get home. You only remember your 2 daughters when you get beautiful clothes, shoes, and gifts during festivals. Every year on their birthday, you throw them a party. What about me? Do you remember my birthday? When have you ever bought me a present during festivals? The clothes and shoes I was wearing were all Song Jomei's leftovers. It doesn't matter. Every time Yang Yuhui beats me until I'm covered in bruises, have you ever said a word of comfort or concern to me? You're usually very busy, but you're so busy that you only have Song Juyue and Song Jomei in your heart. As for me, I'm not even as good as a servant in the Song family. As she spoke, Song Wuyo felt that the original owner was really pitiful. Although she was sentenced to death by Dongfang Xian, she had a happy childhood. Her parents, Dongfang Xian's parents, loved her very much. They couldn't bear to see her hurt at all, let alone beat her. When the original owner was 10 years old, Song Jomei deliberately pushed her down. She got up and scolded Song Jomei. Song Nan saw it and rushed over to slap her little face. Gu Yanhao listened to her word by word. His gaze on her became deeper and deeper. Wuyo, it's all Daddy's fault. Song Nan's forehead was sweating. Song Wuyo looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. You're indeed wrong. You love your eldest daughter so much. Now that the Song family is in an economic crisis, you should look for her, not me. This is also her chance to repay you. You're not allowed to say that my Miss Song is unfilial. Chapter 220. Song Nan was embarrassed. If Song Juyue had 500 million, would he have lowered his face to come to them? You are also my daughter. No matter what, you have lived in the Song family for 14 years. Until you married young Master Gu, I have also given you pocket money every month for the past 3 years. Now that Dad is in trouble, if you have the ability to help me, it can be considered as repaying me for raising you for the past 14 years. Song Nan said it very tactfully, but any smart person could tell that he had raised Song Wuyo for 14 years, and Song Wuyo had to repay him no matter what. Hearing this, Gu Yanhao suddenly smiled faintly. His slender fingers gently tapped on the table in a very rhythmic manner. Song Nan turned back to look at him. When he met his smiling and unfathomable eyes, his heart skipped a beat. He quickly retracted his gaze and looked at Song Woo-yo. Song Woo-yo sat on the sofa, raised her head slightly, and looked at Song Nan with a faint smile. Song Nan swallowed his saliva. Why were these two people smiling the same? Why were they looking at him with such cold gazes? It was hard to guess what they were thinking. 14 years of kindness. Song Woo-yo frowned and looked at Gu Yenhao. How should I repay you? Gu Yenhao smiled at her dotingly. 1 million a year. Song Woo-yo calculated and was surprised. Doesn't that mean you have to pay 14 million? Gu Yenhao nodded. Yes. Song Woo-yo looked at Song Nan with an expression that said, you have profited. Song Nan's expression turned ugly. Embarrassing. This was the most embarrassing moment in his life. He had lowered his face to ask Song Woo-yo for help, and she only gave him 14 million. Unfilial daughter. What an unfilial daughter. Dad, for the past 3 years, I really have to thank you for giving me 3,000 yuan of pocket money every month like you were a beggar. In order to repay you, I'll give you 15 million yuan, including the pocket money for the past 3 years. Song Woo-yo stood up and smiled sweetly at Gu Yenhao. I'm going back to work. Gu Yenhao smiled. Okay, I'll get the finance department to transfer the money to father-in-law's account. After watching Song Woo-yo leave with a smile, she did not immediately withdraw her gaze. Once again, Song Nan felt that he was nothing but air in front of Gu Yenhao. Song Nan turned around with a fawning smile on his old face. Ah ho, no matter what, I'm still your father-in-law. That 500 million, 20 million. Gu Yenhao suddenly said. He retracted his gaze and looked at Song Nan coldly. Since you're my father-in-law, I'll give you 20 million. 15 million is Woo-yo's way of repaying your kindness. The rest is my gift to you when I marry her. When Song Nan heard this, he secretly gritted his teeth. You win. There's a big difference between 20 million and 500 million. You see, 500 million is nothing to you, but to me, it's enough to save the entire Song Corporation. Sorry. Gu Yenhao curled his lips and revealed a helpless smile. I've become a henpecked husband. My wife is in charge of all the money. To me, 500 million is my lifetime smoking money. Gu Yenhao took the documents from the side and began to review them. He said, Father-in-law, you can go back. The 20 million will be in your account before noon. After saying this, Gu Yenhao began to work seriously. Ah ho! Song Nan took a step forward, but when he saw the way he was working, he could feel a sense of oppression. He swallowed the words on the tip of his tongue. He stood there for a few minutes with no intention of leaving. Gu Yenhao did not chase him away. He finished reviewing one document after another. President, it's time for the meeting. At this time, Secretary Zhang came in with a pile of documents for the meeting. Okay. Gu Yenhao signed his name on the document, closed it, and got up. When he saw Song Nan, he was surprised. Father-in-law, why are you still here? Chapter 221. Song Nan's face is full of embarrassment and embarrassment. He hesitates. Ah ho, now the bank refuses to lend to the Song enterprise. Gu Yenhao seems not to hear him. He orders Secretary Zhang, make a pot of Longjing tea. Boss Long likes to drink it. Secretary Zhang nods. Okay, boss. Father-in-law, please go out. I'm going to a meeting. Gu Yenhao stands in front of Song Nan and looks at him expressionlessly. It seems that this man is not willing to lend money to me anyway. Song Nan suddenly raises his head and looks at Gu Yenhao like a father-in-law. Ah ho, are you so heartless? Gu Yanhao looks at him funny, how am I heartless? Anyway, Zhuyue also has a great contribution to the Gu clan, right? Most of the Gu clan's women's clothing is so popular because of his daughter's design. Gu Yanhao raises his eyebrows. Didn't I give Song Zhuyue's salary and bonus? Song Nan was rendered speechless with that one sentence. Do you know how much Song Zhuyue gets every month? That number is higher than any top designer. Song Nan certainly knows that Song Zhuyue's salary is quite high. Gu Yanhao raises his wrist and looks at the time on the watch. He looks at Song Nan with clear eyes. Father-in-law, I'm going to a meeting. If you like to stay in my office, Ade will accompany you. After returning from Gu Yanhao's office, Song Wuyo has been busy making clothes. Finally, 2 cheongsams are made. The cheongsam is put on the model. Song Wuyo stands in front of the model and appreciates it with satisfaction. The style and design of these 2 cheongsams are the same. They are no different from ordinary styles. But the material is suitable and the tailoring is decent. In order to stand out, Song Wuyo embroidered the collar and the sleeves. Her embroidery was very delicate, especially the flowers, birds, mountains, and rivers embroidered on the cheongsam. Looking at it this way, it was impossible to tell that this beautiful and lively pattern was embroidered on it. The color was orange with flowers and birds dancing in the background. When worn by the model, it not only presented a natural calmness, but also presented a flowing beauty. Miss, it's so beautiful. Su Jing's eyes lit up as she stared at the cheongsam. Song Wuyo smiled and said, Am I beautiful or is the cheongsam beautiful? The cheongsam is beautiful, but Miss is even more beautiful. Sweet mouth. Song Wuyo smiled and said, Keep it well and pack it properly. Send it to Lady Jier tomorrow. All right. Su Jing came over and took off the cheongsam from the mannequin. While taking it off, she praised Song Wuyo. I didn't expect Miss to be so skillful. You made 2 such beautiful cheongsams in such a short time. When I'm free, I'll make one for you. Song Wuyo returned to her seat and sat down. As soon as she sat down, she received a message on her phone. The screen lit up and she glanced at it. The person who sent the message was Gu Yanhao. Song Wuyo reached out and swiped her slender fingers on the screen. I'm in a meeting. I miss you. Boring. This was Song Wuyo's first reaction, but she couldn't help but feel sweet in her heart. She quickly replied to the other party, What are you thinking about when you're not in a meeting? After sending the message, the other party replied not long after, What are you doing? When Song Wuyo was typing the message, the office door was opened. Song Zhuyue hurried in and stood behind Song Wuyo. When she wanted to ask Song Wuyo why she didn't lend money to Song Wuyo, she glanced at the contact on Song Wuyo's phone, Gu Yanhao. She also saw Song Wuyo's half-typed words. Song Zhuyue's expression changed slightly. Song Wuyo was texting young Master Gu at work. Song Zhuyue's heart sank. Young Master Gu was doing such a boring thing. Chapter 222. Song Wuyo looked up and saw Song Zhuyue staring at her phone. Her expression was not very good. She smiled. Big sister, are you looking for me? Why don't you lend Dad the money? Song Zhuyue opened the door. Dad asked for an exorbitant loan of 500 million. How can I have so much money? Big sister, you know that I haven't been working before. You don't have money, but young Master Gu does. Then why did you ask Dad to borrow from young Master Gu? Why did you borrow from me? Dad said that it's all up to you whether young Master Gu wants to lend or not. Song Zhuyue gritted her teeth. Song Wuyo smiled gently, 500 million is too much. The Song family has raised you for nothing. Ungrateful wretch. Song Joyue scolded. I asked young Master Gu to give Dad 15 million. Song Wuyo looked up and smiled faintly at Song Joyue. How much did you give? What does it have to do with you? Song Joyue stared guiltily at Song Wuyo. Song Wuyo sneered. The Song family has raised you for nothing, you ungrateful wretch. Who are you talking about? Song Joyue clenched her fists. She was so angry that she wanted to hit Song Wuyo. Whoever answers me, I'm talking about. Song Wuyo looked at Song Joyue arrogantly. Song Nan has always doted on you. Now that he's in trouble, shouldn't you repay him? After a pause, Song Wuyo looked at Song Joyue with a faint smile and said slowly, Don't tell me you can't even take out 15 million? As if the truth had been exposed, Song Joyue was furious. She glared at Song Wuyo. I don't need to tell you how much money I have. What's the fuss about? A clear and low voice came from the office door. Song Joyue was shocked. She quickly turned around and saw Gu Yanhao standing at the door. Gu Yanhao's gaze was sharp and cold as he looked at her. Song Joyue's heart skipped a beat. She had the urge to run away. Song Wuyo raised her eyebrows and turned around to look at the figure blocking the office door. Wasn't he in a meeting? Why did he come down so quickly? Gu Yanhao strode in and looked at Song Wuyo. Why haven't you replied to my message for so long? Song Wuyo shrugged. Big sister is picking on me. I don't have time to watch. Song Joyue's expression changed. What is it? Gu Yanhao's eyes were as black as ink, but his gaze was incomparably sharp. She called me an ingrate and blamed me for not lending 500 million yuan to Song Nan, Song Wuyo said faintly. When Gu Yanhao heard this, he raised his eyebrows and looked sharply at Song Joyue. Song Joyue, don't you know that it's office hours now? Song Joyue's heart ached terribly. She lowered her head. I'm sorry, young Master Gu. Apologize to Mrs. President. Song Joyue's face instantly turned pale. Song Wuyo raised her lips provocatively and revealed a faint smile. Song Joyue clenched her fists tightly. She was unable to say the words, I'm sorry, to Song Wuyo. Gu Yanhao looked at her coldly. In the future, you're not allowed to bring your private matters into work. Go write a report and submit it to the finance department. 3 months of your bonus will be deducted. 3 months of bonus deducted. Song Joyue suddenly raised her head and looked at Gu Yanhao in astonishment. Gu Yanhao looked at her sharply. Hurry up and apologize to Mrs. President and go back to work. Do you have to treat me like this? Song Joyue suddenly burst into tears. She looked extremely aggrieved and looked at Gu Yanhao with a trace of resentment. Seeing her cry, Song Wuyo was stunned. Was this the arrogant Song Joyue? Why did she cry just like that? Gu Yanhao's expression did not change, but his gaze became colder. Apologize to Mrs. President. Chapter 223. I'm the best designer in the Gu clan. Most of the Gu clan's leading fashion brands were designed by me. How can you treat me like this? Do you think I should pretend nothing happened when I saw you picking on my wife for no reason? Song Joyue, I paid you a high salary to design clothes for the Gu clan, not to pick on my wife, Gu Yanhao said coldly. Forget it. Song Wuyo suddenly said, I'm not someone who doesn't have any sense of propriety. You don't need to apologize. Hurry back to work. Song Joyue glared at Song Wuyo with her teary eyes and left with a sad heart. Gu Yanhao bent down and gently pinched Song Wuyo's chin. He smiled wickedly and said, Come to my office for dinner. Wait a minute, Song Wuyo pushed his hand away and showed him a few photos on her phone. How is it? She had taken the photos just now. Gu Yanhao's eyes darkened when he saw the Chong Sam in the photos. He was amazed and said, "It's beautiful." His heart was filled with surging waves of emotions. He stood up straight and held his phone tightly. There was a look of disbelief in his deep eyes. He looked at her, then at Su Jing, who was standing silently next to her. Finally, his eyes locked on Song Wuyo's face. "You didn't use a tailor. Is this how you made it? Miss did it alone." Su Jing didn't dare to take the credit. Song Wuyo looked at Su Jing lovingly. "You helped a lot too." Gu Yanhao also looked at Su Jing. "I'll give you a bonus." Su Jing was shocked by the favor and humiliation. "It's a pity that such a beautiful Chong Sam was given to Mrs. G. Air," Gu Yanhao said with a hidden meaning. "It's not a pity. She has already transferred 5 million to my account." Song Wuyo smiled. She snatched the phone back from Gu Yanhao. This was the second time she had relied on her own strength to earn a large sum of money in this world. She was very happy. Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows. "Only 5 million for 2 Chong Sams." Song Wuyo was surprised. 5 million isn't enough. If you promote this to the Gu clan, your annual sales will definitely exceed 50 billion yuan. When Su Jing heard this, her eyes sparkled. How much money would Miss have to pay? Really? Song Wuyo also seemed to see a lot of money. Of course. Gu Yanhao raised his head and gently stroked her head. He lowered his eyes and looked at her deeply. "Song Wuyo, I'm shocked by you once again. You're so good at making vintage clothes and the Chong Sam." He couldn't believe that this was the Song Wuyo he knew. Song Wuyo pursed her lips. She didn't want him to have any more doubts, so she had to lie. "Ever since I found out that the Gu clan was involved in clothing, I started to secretly learn how to design and tailor clothes. You're so hardworking. You have to be rewarded." Gu Yanhao pinched her beautiful face. Song Wuyo hated it when he pinched her face. She slapped his hand away and looked up at him. "What reward are you going to give me? What do you want?" Gu Yanhao curled his lips into a charming and devilish smile. "I haven't thought of it yet. When I think of it, I'll tell you. I'll reward you with my body and heart. Do you want it?" Gu Yanhao bent over and moved his handsome face closer. Song Wuyo's eyes sparkled as she carefully looked at the handsome face in front of her. The man's lips curved into a perfect smile. His smile was evil and bewitching. His deep eyes were like a whirlpool that wanted to suck her in. Young Master Gu was starting to flirt. Was this really okay? Chapter 224. Song Wuyo's heartbeat quickened. She pursed her lips and snorted. "Your body and heart are worthless." Gu Yanhao's long and slender fingers pinched her chin gently and turned her face over to look at him. "You dare to say that I'm worthless?" Song Wuyo looked at him calmly. "Why wouldn't I dare? You're getting bolder." Gu Yanhao curled his lips into a naughty smile. "You have to be punished." "How?" "Punished." Not waiting for her to finish, the man lowered his head, thin cold lips, with her 2 soft lips, pressed together. Oh my, she was kissed again. Song Wuyo's eyes widened and her brain crashed as she looked at the face right in front of her in astonishment. When Su Jing saw this, she thought, oh my, how embarrassing. Such an embarrassing thing was not suitable for her to see. She retreated out of the room quietly. Afraid that she would avoid him, Gu Yanhao cupped the back of her face with one hand. The kiss deepened. His long tongue plunged in and took over her heart. He sucked and nibbled on her, enjoying himself immensely. Song Wuyo's mind was blank and her heart was thumping furiously. Her stiff body was getting softer and softer, and her breathing was getting hurried. After a series of intense kisses, Gu Yanhao slowed down. It was as though he was tasting a dessert as he sucked on it gently. It was only when Song Wuyo's breathing got smoother and her brain came back to life that she pushed him away harshly. She glared at him with a blushing face. Gu Yanhao, it's working hours. Gu Yanhao was shameless. This territory is mine. I have the final say. You're mine. You're not allowed to kiss me so casually in the future. Gu Yanhao curled his lips and looked at her devilishly. Who said so? You're mine as well. Song Wuyo grabbed her handbag and glared at him. Aren't we going out for dinner? He got up and walked out of the office quickly. Gu Yanhao had a smile in his eyes. Seeing her embarrassed and anxious back, he couldn't help but chuckle a few times. He was in a good mood. The next day, Song Wuyo wanted to give the clothes to Mrs. G. Air. Gu Yanhao was meeting a very important client today. However, he still personally escorted her to Madame Air's villa. Song Wuyo got out of the car with the clothes. Gu Yanhao looked at her. When are you going back? Call me in advance. Okay. After Song Wuyo got out of the car, the door of the villa opened, and Mrs. G. Air personally came out to welcome Song Wuyo. Today, Madame G. Air was wearing a bright red cheongsam. The bright red color on her was neither vulgar nor ostentatious. Instead, it made her look even more noble and dignified. His every movement exuded a tranquil elegance. Madame G. Air. When Song Wuyo saw her, her eyes lit up, and her dark beautiful eyes flashed with a touch of amazement. Madame G. Air was one of the few women she had ever seen. She was almost 60 years old, but she was still well maintained. Her skin was white, like a woman in her 40s. The last time you came, you only drank chrysanthemum tea. I think you should be fond of chrysanthemums. I have made tea and prepared snacks for you. Madame G. Air came forward and eagerly took Song Wuyo's hand with a smile. The cheongsam is ready. I believe it will look better on you than the one you are wearing now. Song Wuyo said confidently. It must look good from your hands. The two people chatted and returned to the living room. Mushin learned the art of tea. When she heard Madame G. Air say that there was an important guest coming, she specially cooked tea and entertained her well. Hearing Madame G. Air's voice, Mushin raised her head with a smile. When she saw that the person who came in with Madame G. Air was Song Wuyo, the smile on Mushin's mouth froze. Wasn't this Mrs. Gu Song Wuyo? Chapter 225. Was she the important guest that Mrs. G. Air mentioned? Mrs. Gu. Although Mushin didn't like Song Wuyo, she still had to entertain her since she was Mrs. G. Air's important guest. Mushin. Song Wuyo was slightly surprised. As soon as she saw Mushin's face, she couldn't help but think of her sister-in-law and her previous life. Mushin saw that Song Wuyo directly called out her name with a slightly surprised expression. Mushin thought, had Mrs. Gu always been paying attention to her? Why did she have such a reaction when she saw her? They had only met at the party, but there wasn't much interaction between them. Mushin is Jungua's girlfriend. She's on vacation, so she came over to accompany me. Mrs. G. Air smiled. Then she waved her hand and said to Mushin, Mushin, come over and take a look at Mrs. Gu. It's too distant to call her Mrs. Gu. Then she looked at Song Wuyo. Can I call you Wuyo directly? Song Wuyo nodded, but her eyes were smiling as she looked at Mushin. Of course. Mrs. G. Air smiled demurely and gave a look to the servant who had just received Song Wuyo's bag. The servant gestured and quickly took out the cheongsam from inside. Mushin, look at the cheongsam that Wuyo made. Mrs. G. Air's beautiful smile was always kind. Mushin was surprised. Song Wuyo knew how to make cheongsams. Mushin looked at Song Wuyo with a questioning gaze. Song Wuyo's outfit today was very sunny. Her bangs were combed back, revealing her full forehead. Her hair was tied into a long ponytail, and her hairline was very beautiful. She was wearing an Immerse limited edition yellow knee-length dress that showed off her perfect figure. Her skin was very good, as delicate as glue. Just by looking at it, one could imagine how smooth and tender it was. A pair of pink flat-heeled sandals revealed her round pearl-like toes. It was very beautiful. Mushin looked at Song Wuyo from the beginning to the end. Such a Song Wuyo was undoubtedly perfect. Even though she was petite, only about 1.63 meters tall, she gave off an extraordinary aura. The servant had already taken out the cheongsam. When Madame G. saw the real thing, she liked it very much. It's so beautiful. Even though she was wearing a qipao made by a famous teacher, she was still very beautiful. But when she saw the cheongsam made by Song Wuyo, she couldn't help but exclaim. It was really beautiful. Especially the embroidery patterns, they were even more perfect than those that were mechanically embroidered. Madame G. had a special liking for cheongsams. Even at banquets, she would appear in cheongsams. She had seen many different styles of cheongsam, but this was the first time she had seen one made by Song Wuyo. Perfect. It was perfect. It was too perfect. Mushin was also stunned by the qipao in her hands. This. Mushin stepped forward and touched the peony flower on the qipao. She exclaimed, "Heavens, it was embroidered on. This peony is as beautiful as the mountain and river embroidery on your dress." They were all made by Wuyo. I can see that Wuyo put a lot of effort into making clothes. Madame G. looked at Mushin with a smile and said. When Mushin heard this, she was shocked and looked at Madame G. in disbelief. "Auntie, what are you doing?" Song Wuyo saw Mushin's surprised look and felt that it was a little cute. Madame G.'s smile became even wider. The gift you suddenly received at the party was actually from Wuyo. Really? Mushin's eyes widened as she looked at Song Wuyo in shock. Yes. Song Wuyo nodded. But. Mushin frowned. Didn't you say that you are usually idle and useless? How could you make such a beautiful and awe-inspiring dress? Chapter 226. Song Wuyo smiled. Others even say that I'm arrogant, domineering, willful, and unruly. Do I look like that? No. Mushin shook her head in a daze. Rather than listening to others, it's better to experience it for yourself. Mushin looked at Song Wuyo in surprise. That dress is the champion of the competition. If you sell the sales rights, you'll definitely make a lot of money. Why did you give me the dress? Song Wuyo looked at Mushin and smiled. Because you're warm and cute. Your temperament is very similar to that dress. That's not right. Mushin tilted her head and thought for a long time before saying, although I wasn't there, I watched the live broadcast and replayed it repeatedly. That model wearing that dress is simply devastatingly beautiful. That model is you. Mushin was startled again. That model is more compatible with that dress. Compared to Mushin's surprise, Song Wuyo appeared very calm. She nodded and smiled. It's indeed me. Oh my God. Mushin was shocked. Rumors really can't be trusted. Silly girl. Mrs. G. looked at Mushin dotingly. Of course, rumors can't be trusted. Song Wuyo carefully observed the way Madame G. looked at Mu Axean and the way she smiled when she spoke to Mu Axean. Judging from Mrs. G.'s attitude toward Mushin, she liked Mushin very much. However, Song Wuyo looked up and looked at this luxurious villa. In the huge living room, other than the servants, she didn't see Mushin's so-called boyfriend. She didn't know if Ching Junghwa treated Mushin well. In her previous life, her sister-in-law was a sincere woman. She was born in a family of officials, but she didn't make things difficult for her at all. After marrying her brother, she took care of her parents and treated her family well. She was considerate of everything. Every time her parents met her, they would praise her brother for marrying a good wife. The last time Song Wuyo saw her was before she was banished to the cold palace. Later, she only knew about her situation from what she heard. When she was 7 months pregnant, the Song clan was annihilated. Even her maiden family suffered a calamity. Thinking of this, Song Wuyo felt very guilty. It was her. She was the one who had harmed all the innocent people. Now that she saw that Mushin looked like her sister-in-law, Song Wuyo couldn't help but want to treat her well. She hoped that in this life, she would have a happy love life. Wuyo, what are you thinking about? Madame Ji could not help but ask with a smile when she saw Song Wuyo staring at Mu Axayan in a daze. Song Wuyo quickly recovered and smiled calmly. Mushin is very beautiful. She has a very special temperament. Girls love to be beautiful, especially when they were praised by a woman who was prettier than them. They would feel indescribably happy. Mu Axayan smiled sweetly and shyly looked at Song Wuyo. Don't praise me like that, I'll be proud. Madame Ji smiled and looked at Mushin with eyes full of tolerance and love. When I first saw Mushin, I also liked her very much. Auntie, I want to see you wear the cheongsam made by Mrs. Gu in advance. Mu Axayan came over and intimately hugged Mrs. Her pleasant voice carried a trace of coquettishness. Okay, I'll wear it now for you to admire. Madame Ji looked at Song Wuyo and smiled. Wuyo, sit down and have a cup of tea. I'll go in and change clothes first. Song Wuyo nodded. Okay, I brought a needle and thread. If there's anything lacking, I can change it. Madame Ji smiled. What a thoughtful child. Madame Ji put on the cheongsam made by Song Wuyo. The cheongsam on her body showed a unique temperament than on a model with a perfect figure. Mushin really didn't know what to say except to praise her beauty. Madame Ji stood in front of Song Wuyo. Song Wuyo's eyes lit up. Suddenly, she felt that Madame Ji could control all cheongsams. Young master. At this time, Madame Ji's eldest son, Ching Junhua, came back. The servant greeted him respectfully. Ching Junhua looked straight ahead and walked in with steady steps. When he saw Madame Ji his sharp eyes lit up. Mom, you bought new clothes. Song Wuyo couldn't help but glance at the low but clear voice. Ching Junhua just looked at her. Chapter 227. Meeting Ching Junhua's sharp eyes, Song Wuyo frowned slightly. She felt that this man was not a kind person. Similarly, when Ching Junhua saw Song Wuyo, a glint flashed across his eyes. He felt that this woman's temperament was special, and she had a pretty and pink face. But that pair of calm eyes made people feel that she looked at everything so indifferently. Junhua, what do you think? Mrs. Ji opened her arms and elegantly turned around. After stopping, she looked at Ching Junhua with a smile. Ching Junhua looked at Mrs. Ji and nodded. It's beautiful. It suits your temperament very well. Wuyo specially designed it for me, Mrs. Ji said with a smile. Wuyo. Ching Junhua raised his eyebrows and looked sharply at Song Wuyo. Gu Yanhao's wife, Song Wuyo. Song Wuyo nodded. Yes. Migu rode his horse around the ranch twice and finally stopped in front of the huge sculpture. He held the reins with both hands, and the wind messed up his bangs. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the sculpture of a fish leaping over the dragon gate. Last time, Song Woo-yo hit it, which caused her serious injuries. Magoo's gaze involuntarily fell on the position where Song Woo-yo was lying. The scene at that time appeared in his mind again. Her painful face was filled with heartless sadness. Her eyes were so empty and desperate. Her weak voice was calling Dongfang Xian, giddy up, behind him, the sound of horse hooves came. The sound of horse hooves was getting closer and closer. Whoosh, a white horse stopped in front of Magoo. Riding on the white horse was Mu Aksayan. Mu Aksayan was still dressed the same as in the morning at Mrs. G-Air's house. Brother, I saw Sister Woo-yo in June Country today. Mu Aksayan's tone was full of excitement. When Magoo heard the two words Woo-yo, he, who was distracted, came back to his senses. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and his peach blossom eyes looked narrow and dark. Sister Woo-yo. This form of address was quite intimate. Mu Aksayan is playing with Woo-yo. Magoo was not surprised that Song Woo-yo would appear in Madame Jier's house. He knew that Song Woo-yo had been making cheongsams for Jier's wife. You're so excited that your face is red. Did Song Woo-yo give you a surprise? Magoo shook his head. In front of Mushin, he once again returned to his sunny and handsome self. The incomparably handsome brother was here. You know what? The one who gave me that unique dress at my party was Sister Woo-yo. I was really stupid at that time. I didn't even think that it was Woo-yo on the card. Mushin said happily, Sister Woo-yo said that she has a hairpin for me and that she will bring it to the ranch when she has time. When Magoo heard this, his gentle peach blossom eyes flashed with a strange light. Song Woo-yo is coming to the ranch. Mushin saw that Magoo did not react at all when he heard that the dress was given by Song Woo-yo. Mushin looked at him. Brother, aren't you surprised? Magoo curled his lips and smiled gently. He looked at Mushin. What are you surprised about? The winner of the clothing competition was designed by Sister Woo-yo, and she cut it herself. Aren't you surprised? Magoo pretended to be indifferent. Why should I be surprised? The one who should be surprised should be Ah-ho. Sister Woo-yo is so beautiful and easy to get along with. Brother Ah-ho married her right. When Mushin thought of Song Woo-yo's frown and smile, she could not help but be infatuated. What a beautiful woman. In the past, she had not interacted with her. She had only heard from Song Jo-yue that Mushin really did not like her. But after interacting with her personally, Mushin liked her very much. Seeing that Mushin liked Song Woo-yo very much, Magoo chuckled. You used to complain in front of me about why Ah-ho did not like Song Jo-yue. Chapter 228. Mu Aksayan smiled embarrassedly. That's because I haven't seen Sister Woo-yo in person. Magoo looked at her warmly. Now that you've seen her, don't you like her very much? Mu Aksayan nodded vigorously. Yes. She's really beautiful. Woo-yo doesn't have many friends. Since you like her so much, you should hang out with her more often when you're free, Magoo said. Yes, we added each other on WeChat and exchanged numbers. Mu Aksayan giggled. Sister Woo-yo said that she likes to ride horses and shoot arrows. Hee, her hobbies are the same as mine. I'm going to invite her to the ranch to have fun some other day. Magoo looked at Mu Aksayan with a faint smile. He rarely saw Mu Aksayan like a woman so much. Even Song Jo-yue didn't seem to like her so much. Even her little face was flushed with excitement. Brother, I'm going back. Mu Aksayan clamped her legs around the horse's abdomen, looking valiant and formidable. The horse raised its front hooves and galloped away. Magoo narrowed his eyes and looked at Mu Aksayan's figure getting further and further away, deep in thought. After a long time, he retracted his gaze and glanced indifferently at the sculpture. He flicked the reins lightly. The horse under him raised its hooves and led him slowly on the ranch. Along the way, he saw the ranch's steward. The steward was instructing the workers to trim the branches. When he saw Magoo, he hurriedly bowed to Magoo. "Young master." Magoo stopped the horse and coldly instructed the steward, "Arrange for someone to tear down the fish leaping over Dragon Gate." The steward was stunned. "What?" Magoo's sharp gaze swept over. "Do I need to repeat myself?" The steward hurriedly nodded. "I understand. I'll arrange for someone to tear it down right away." Strange. That fish leaping over Dragon Gate statue was sculpted last year and cost tens of millions. It was such a pity that it had to be torn down in less than a year. Actually, that sculpture was very grand. A low-profile silver Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost stopped in front of the Ching family's luxurious villa. The car window rolled down and the man in the car turned his head to look out the window. Seeing Song Wuyo and Madame Ji Er walking out talking and laughing, his eyes flickered. The two women were of different ages, but they had the same temperament, dignified and elegant. Mrs. Jill sent Song Wuyo to the front of the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost and gracefully greeted the man in the car. Gu Yanhao nodded. His eyes were locked on Song Wuyo's face as he said in a clear and deep voice, "Get in." After Song Wuyo said goodbye to Mrs. Eyre, she opened the car door and got in. As soon as they got into the car, Gu Yanhao's tall figure leaned forward, and a burst of male hormones followed. Song Wuyo leaned back and saw that Gu Yanhao was only fastening her seatbelt for her. She turned her head shyly and smiled at Mrs. Eyre. Inadvertently, she caught a glimpse of Ching Junhua standing behind Mrs. Eyre. Dressed in a light green military uniform, he was looking at her with a pair of sharp eyes. He seemed to be looking at her, but also seemed to be looking at Gu Yanhao. Song Wuyo frowned slightly. She didn't like Ching Junhua's sharp eyes that wanted to see through everything. When the car left and disappeared in front of her eyes, Mrs. Eyre retracted her gaze and turned to go in reluctantly. The moment she turned around, a touch of sadness flashed across her face. But when she saw Ching Junhua, this sadness only flashed for a moment and quickly disappeared. Mrs. Eyre smiled elegantly at Ching Junhua and asked gently, "Are you going out?" Ching Junhua's sharp eyes were locked on Mrs. Eyre's face. "You seem to like Mrs. Gu very much." Chapter 229. Mrs. Ji Eyre smiled and said, "The cheongsam she made is perfect." Ching Junhua narrowed his eyes, and the way he looked at Mrs. Ji Eyre became sharper and more penetrating. It was as if he wanted to see through her to the bottom of her heart. Mrs. Ji Eyre felt guilty under his gaze, and she avoided his gaze. "I'll go in and change out of the cheongsam. I'll attend the banquet in a few days." As she spoke, Mrs. Ji Eyre walked toward the villa hall. "Mom, don't you think Mrs. Gu's eyes are like yours?" Ching Junhua turned sideways and looked at Mrs. Ji Eyre sharply. Mrs. Ji Eyre's heart trembled when she heard that, and she froze. Ching Junhua bypassed Mrs. Ji Eyre's face. Mrs. Ji Eyre raised her head and looked at Ching Junhua faintly. Ching Junhua looked at her deeply. "Mom, there are some things that you should stop before going too far." Mrs. Ji Eyre was shocked and looked at Ching Junhua in astonishment. "Everyone says that Mrs. Ji Eyre is cold and doesn't like to socialize. I saw you coming out from inside just now, and you got along quite well." Gu Yanhao controlled the steering wheel easily and glanced at Song Wuyo, who was sitting in the passenger seat. "Is Mrs. Ji Eyre cold?" Song Wuyo shook her head. "She treats Muxin quite well. Muxin is her future daughter-in-law. It's normal for her to treat her well." Song Wuyo looked at Gu Yanhao. "You mean it's not normal for Mrs. Ji Eyre to treat me well?" Gu Yanhao chuckled and looked ahead in a good mood. Sister Song didn't make dinner for us tonight. Let's eat outside. Up to you. Gu Yanhao turned his head and looked at her deeply, raising his eyebrows slightly. They arrived at a restaurant with very romantic decorations. Walking into the restaurant, they were greeted by a rich and elegant silence. Unlike other restaurants, it was a little noisy. After passing through a long passage, they arrived at the main hall. The passage was covered with a soft red carpet, and the walls on both sides were painted with various famous oil paintings. The entire passageway gave off a very quiet feeling. They walked into the main hall under the warm reception of the waiter. The atmosphere in the main hall was romantic enough. The lighting was soft and the environment was elegant. Song Wuyo realized that the people sitting at the dining table were all couples. She suddenly thought of the couple's restaurant. She glanced at Gu Yanhao. Gu Yanhao tilted his head and smiled at her. Strangely, Song Wuyo's heart softened when she saw his smile. Gu Yanhao chose a seat by the window. Sitting here, one could admire the flowers and plants in the backyard of the restaurant. After Gu Yanhao ordered, Song Wuyo asked, "Why did you choose this place?" "This position is good, you can enjoy the scenery outside." Gu Yanhao looked at her gently. "I'm not talking about the location. I'm talking about the restaurant. Why did you come here to eat?" Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows. "You don't like this restaurant?" Song Wuyo looked around. This is obviously a couple's restaurant. There was even a small stage in the middle hall. A romantic piano piece was playing on the stage, which matched the atmosphere of the restaurant very well. Gu Yanhao smiled. "That's right, it's a couple's restaurant. The name is also very romantic." "Love you." Song Wuyo snorted. "That's vulgar, not romantic. As long as the other party feels the love, it doesn't matter if it's vulgar." Song Wuyo looked at Gu Yanhao as if he was a stranger and suddenly smiled. "When did you become a Casanova?" Gu Yanhao looked at Song Wuyo charmingly. "When I was in front of you." "Young Master Gu, if you want to pursue our Miss Song, show some sincerity." Chapter 230. Song Wuyo smiled faintly. Her expression was as calm as still water. However, a ripple appeared in her heart because of his bewitching smile. She could not be tempted by him so easily. Song Wuyo looked up and quietly looked at Gu Yanhao, who was smiling faintly. He had the same face as Dong Fangxian. Perhaps he was the reincarnation of Dong Fangxian. If he was really the reincarnation of Dong Fangxian, even if thousands of years had passed, he would still be the man who hurt her. How could she be tempted by the man who killed her 9 generations and silenced her? Her indifferent expression made Gu Yanhao's heart clench. He looked at Song Wuyo deeply and asked, "Song Wuyo, can't you be a little warmer to me?" Song Wuyo was slightly stunned. Then, she quietly looked at Gu Yanhao. "Should I use my warmth to stick to your cold butt?" Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows. "You want to stick to my cold butt?" Gu Yanhao suddenly smiled wickedly. "I'll stick it to you when we get home after dinner." Song Wuyo blushed and stared at him. "You're getting more and more improper." Gu Yanhao reached out and flicked her forehead gently. He chuckled. "You're getting more and more proper." Compared to the past, Song Wuyo was really much more proper now. The dishes they ordered were served one after another. Song Wuyo looked at the dishes that were served. One of them was shredded beggar's chicken. The other dishes seemed to be her favorite. "Why are they all my favorite dishes?" Song Wuyo looked at the dishes. Gu Yanhao smiled. "They're all my favorite dishes too." Song Wuyo frowned slightly and looked at Gu Yanhao strangely. Gu Yanhao smiled and looked at her warmly. Are you going to look at me like that or start eating? Let's eat. Song Woo-yo picked up her chopsticks and picked up some food for herself. The first bite she took was the shredded beggar's chicken. The taste was not as good as hers, nor was it as good as Migu's. However, she was not a picky eater and had a good appetite. She ate all the dishes that were served. Finally, there were 2 desserts, palm-sized cakes. One for her and one for Gu Yenhao. Song Woo-yo pushed her dessert to Gu Yenhao. I'm full. You can have it. Gu Yenhao looked at her with a deep gaze. You don't like desserts. She used to love desserts the most. The fridge was always filled with all kinds of small cakes. I can't eat anymore, Song Woo-yo said. Gu Yenhao smiled. I heard that young girls love desserts. I'm not a young girl anymore. Song Woo-yo did not care about that. Eat. Gu Yenhao pointed at the small cake with his chin. The desserts in this restaurant are super delicious. You can have 2 bites. Chocolate ingredients. It can replenish all kinds of energy in the body. You're too thin and weak. Your breasts and buttocks are not big enough. Desserts can make you full. Song Woo-yo looked at Gu Yenhao reproachfully. She would eat, okay. So much for nagging. Even her breasts and buttocks were brought up to the table. Song Woo-yo took a small spoon and ate a small mouthful. The taste was indeed not bad. Although it was a dessert, it was not too sweet. She would not get sick of it even if she ate 2 portions. Doesn't it taste good? Gu Yenhao asked. Song Woo-yo raised her head and frowned. Why was this man looking at her with such anticipation? Could it be, you made the dessert yourself? That was impossible. He had been sitting here the whole time. When Gu Yenhao heard that, he raised his chin arrogantly. I'm a man. I don't do this. Chapter 231. Suddenly, he gave a devilish smile. If you like it, I'll put down my noble status and serve you. How about that? Song Woo-yo pursed her lips. I'm afraid that I'll have indigestion. With that, she took another 2 bites. This dessert was really delicious. He ate it in small bites, and soon, it became a big mouthful. This big mouthful entered his mouth. Why was there something hard on her teeth? Looking at the movements of her mouth, Gu Yenhao suddenly looked nervous. Song Woo-yo used her tongue to press down on the hard thing. After swallowing the dessert in her mouth, she spat it out and caught it with her palm. Ring? Song Woo-yo raised her head and looked at Gu Yenhao in confusion. Gu Yenhao lowered his head and pretended not to know anything as he drank his dessert. Gu Yenhao, is this your doing? Song Woo-yo asked. When Gu Yenhao heard that, he raised his head immediately. What do you mean? This is romance. Why are you giving me a ring out of nowhere? Song Woo-yo did not understand. Wedding ring. Gu Yenhao looked at her tenderly. To make up for your wedding ring. When Song Woo-yo heard that, she felt a little sour in her heart. She was not happy because of that. The original owner had known him since she was 13 years old and had always wanted to marry him. In the end, he did marry her. But there was no wedding, no flowers, and no ring. In these 3 years of marriage, his coldness towards her made her heart hurt. He could not understand it at all. The more arrogant and despotic she acted, the more pain she felt in her heart. Song Woo-yo's expression was indifferent. She knew that he had an ulterior motive for letting her eat the dessert. She handed the ring back to Gu Yenhao. I don't like it. Gu Yenhao raised his brows and his eyes darkened. You don't like this style, or you don't like the ring. This was a 10-carat diamond ring. didn't they say that all women like diamond rings? I don't like rings, Song Woo said. It doesn't look good on me. Her fingers were long and slender, fair and beautiful. Wearing a ring would only cover up her beauty. Gu Yanhao's face darkened as he looked at her deeply. Is it because it doesn't look good on you, or is it because you don't want to accept my wedding ring? Song Woo looked at him in amusement. Gu Yanhao, the divorce agreement is in my hands. Don't you think it's ironic that you're trying to fix your wedding ring now? She mentioned the divorce agreement again. We've already had sex many times, Gu Yanhao said. Every day that I don't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau for divorce is a day that I will fulfill my duty as a wife, Song Woo said nonchalantly, but in fact, she didn't feel good. Put it on. Gu Yanhao took the ring with one hand and grabbed her little hand with the other, forcibly putting it on for her. You. Song Woo didn't even have the chance to withdraw her hand. She glared at Gu Yanhao. You always do things your own way. Domineering. After putting on the ring, Gu Yanhao didn't let go of her hand immediately. He looked at her with a chuckle. I will do even more domineering things to you in the future. Also, you have to fulfill your duty as a wife every day for the rest of your life. You're so annoying. Song Woo stared at him reproachfully and glanced at the ring on her finger. She didn't know if it was because of the love left in her heart, but she actually didn't hate it. When we have time, let's make up for the wedding. Gu Yanhao chuckled. This was the first time Song Woo saw him smiling so bashfully and brightly. Song Woo snorted coldly. I'll sign the agreement when we get back. Gu Yanhao's eyes darkened and then he smiled evilly. You can try. I don't mind using all kinds of positions to conquer you. Chapter 232. When Song Woo heard that, she blushed. Gu Yanhao, can you be any more evil? Gu Yanhao answered honestly, yes, for you, I will walk the path of evil braver and braver. Braver my ass. I'm full. Song Woo picked up her bag and pretended to go back. Bill. He had wanted to give her a romantic performance, but when he saw her indifferent expression when she saw the ring, Gu Yanhao was a little afraid that she would be even more indifferent to his performance or laugh at him. He was afraid that his heart would become uncomfortable because of her rejection. After paying the bill, Gu Yanhao and Song Woo walked out of the restaurant. Gu Yanhao was about to ask her to wait for him here while he went to get the car. Suddenly, his gaze turned cold. He quickly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Protecting her with his arms, he quickly turned around and lay down on the ground. Before Song Woo could react to what was going on, she suddenly heard a bang. Song Woo was stunned. What was that sound? A gunshot. Bang! Another gunshot sounded. The people in the restaurant and on the street heard the gunshot and started to scream in panic. Bullets whizzed past Gu Yanhao. He hugged Song Woo and rolled a few times on the ground to avoid the bullets. Wherever he rolled, there were bullets hitting him. The bullets hit the hard concrete road and produced strong sparks and sounds. Bang bang, Gu Yanhao turned sideways and used his body to shield Song Woo behind him. His other hand was already holding a gun and aiming at a building across the street. Bang bang, he fired 2 shots in one direction. The people on the street were in chaos. Some were running and some were screaming. A few were lying on the ground after being shot because they were running around. Song Woo was behind him and looked at him nervously. When she saw the people lying on the ground, Song Woo frowned. Ah! Not far behind him, a girl suddenly fell to the ground because she was shot. Song Woo was shocked and quickly turned around to look. It was a little girl about 10 years old. Her heart was bleeding non-stop. Song Woo's pupils shrank. She got up and rushed over. Little girl. Song Wuyo picked up the little girl. It hurts. The little girl's clear and dark eyes were filled with fear. It hurts. She had just come out of the snack bar with her mother. Her mother had asked her to wait for her here while she went to get the car. When she heard the gunshots, she ran around like a headless fly. Don't be afraid, I'll take you to the hospital. Song Wuyo pressed a hand on the little girl's chest, trying to calm herself down. After Gu Yanhao killed the enemy on the opposite building, he realized that Song Wuyo was not behind him. He was so shocked that his eyes scanned the surroundings like a wild wolf. When he saw her holding a little girl and looking at him, he rushed over. Song Wuyo said anxiously, "She's injured. Send her to the hospital. Give her to me." Gu Yanhao reached out to take the little girl. Suddenly, a red light shot from behind Song Wuyo. Gu Yanhao was shocked because he had already caught the little girl with one hand and held the gun with the other hand. He had to take a step forward and pushed Song Wuyo away with his body. At the same time, he raised his arm and fired. Bang, bang, Song Wuyo staggered a few steps. Before she could steady herself, she heard two gunshots. One came from the front, and the other came from the side. Then, there was a bang sound. It was the sound of a bullet entering flesh. Song Wuyo was shocked. She quickly turned around and saw the tall Gu Yanhao staggered back 2 steps before he could steady himself. Gu Yanhao. Song Wuyo rushed up to support him and stabilize the little girl in his arms. Song Wuyo was shocked when he saw that there was a hole in the white shirt on his chest. Fresh blood spurted out and dyed the white shirt red in no time. "You were shot." After Gu Yanhao steadied himself, his handsome face did not reveal the slightest bit of pain even though he was shot. He used the hand that was holding the gun to hold onto her waist and hugged her. His deep and sharp eyes scanned her body and there was a hint of nervousness in his low voice. "Are you hurt?" "No." Song Wuyo shook her head. Looking at the shocking wound on his chest, her heart clenched in pain. Chapter 233. No. Song Wuyo shook her head. Her heart ached as she looked at the ghastly wound on his chest. He was already injured, yet he was still concerned about whether she was hurt or not. If he had not pushed her away in time, she would be the one who was injured. The corners of Gu Yanhao's lips formed a charming curve. "It's good that you're not hurt." Song Wuyo looked at his wound with heartache. She then looked at the little girl in his arms and said anxiously, "Let's go to the hospital now." The little girl had already fainted in his arms. Song Wuyo, the little girl, and the other family members of the injured were waiting anxiously outside the operating theater. The little girl's parents were crying softly as they hugged each other. Song Wuyo's heart ached as she listened to their cries. She sat on the lounge chair. Although she looked calm and composed, she was actually as anxious as an ant in a pot. When she recalled the scene where Gu Yanhao took the bullet for her, she felt as if her heart was being squeezed by a hand. She knew that he was shot on the right side of his chest and that his heart would not be hurt. However, she was still very worried about him. If his lungs were hurt or his artery was damaged, he would. Song Wuyo looked at Gu Yanhao's operating theater with teary eyes. Would he die? Would he leave her? Song Wuyo pursed her lips tightly to suppress the bitterness in her heart. If he were to die, how would she live in this world? She had delayed signing the divorce agreement because she did not want to leave just like that. She had just arrived in this world and did not have any relatives or friends she could trust. If he were to die, the only thing she had left in this world would be gone. Her clothes were stained with his blood. On the way to the hospital, his wound kept bleeding. Did he hurt his arteries with the amount of blood he was bleeding? The more Song Wuyo thought about it, the more frightened she became. She suddenly thought of her previous life. There was once when Dongfang Xian brought a few of his men to hide in the enemy's territory. They wanted to know the enemy's terrain and how to attack. She was anxiously waiting for their safe return at the military camp. At midnight the next day, she finally waited for them to come back. Instead, they waited until Dongfang Xian, who had been shot in the chest, was sent back by his subordinates. At that time, Dongfang Xian was already on the verge of death. Blood kept flowing out of the arrow wound. That position was the same as where Gu Yanhao had been shot, the right side of his chest. Actually, it wasn't fatal. It was just that the arrowhead was poisonous. She and the military doctor tried their best to save him. In order to draw out the poison in his body, she used a knife to make a few cuts on his palms and feet. She had the soldiers constantly help him press the blood out. After the doctor removed the arrowhead from his body, she was so flustered that she couldn't care about anything else. She used her mouth to suck out the thick black blood from his wound. He, who was on his last breath, resisted, not allowing her to do so. She would be in danger if she accidentally swallowed the poisoned blood. She would die even faster than him. But she couldn't care less. Her only thought at that time was that he couldn't die. If he died, what would she do? She really couldn't imagine, nor could she accept, what would happen to her if she suddenly didn't have him by her side. In their hometown, they were childhood sweethearts who were inseparable. She disguised herself as a man and joined the army with him. She fought side by side with him in every battle. Even when the soldiers found out that she was a girl, she still fought side by side with him in the military camp. They had never been separated. In the end, a skilled doctor found a herbal decoction that could cure hundreds of poisons and gave it to him to drink. The poison in his body was cured, but he had lost too much blood. He lay weakly in the military camp to recuperate. When she heard that his life was not in danger, she was so nervous and worried that she finally couldn't help but cry in front of his bed. When his subordinates saw this, they left together with the doctor. The man on the bed raised his hand weakly and stroked her head. He weakly curved his perfect but pale and cracked lips. "Silly girl, I'm alive and well. Why are you crying?" Song Wuyo looked up at him sadly with teary eyes. "Do you know how worried and nervous I was?" The man looked at her lovingly. "I know. Why weren't you more careful? If something happened to you, how would I live?" Chapter 234. The man's gaze was gentle. "As long as you're healthy, I won't let anything happen to me." Song Wuyo choked and said, "What if I'm not healthy one day?" The man's gaze was deep. "We won't be separated. When will the war end?" At this moment, Song Wuyo suddenly missed their childhood. This way, they wouldn't have to worry about each other dying on the battlefield. "Do you regret joining the army with me?" Dongfang Xian narrowed his eyes. Song Wuyo shook her head. "No." She held his hand tightly and looked at him seriously. "Promise me. No matter what the situation is, you have to live for me. I was really panicking just now. If you're not here, how am I going to live? Without you, I won't be able to live." Dongfang Xian smiled gently. "Silly girl, I won't let you experience the pain of living alone." Her tears fell onto the back of her hand on her lap. Song Wuyo's face was full of sadness. She raised her head and looked at the door of the operating theater with sad eyes. "Dongfang Xian, you said that you won't let me experience the pain of living alone. You gave me death. Have you ever thought that I'm in another world, living alone without you? If anything happened to Gu Yanhao, she would really be living alone. There was no one by her side who loved her, or the person she loved. She lived alone. When Migu received the news that Gu Yanhao was injured, he sped from the ranch to the hospital. He didn't care if it was night or other people's safety. He ran the red lights all the way. He rushed straight to the hospital. He didn't want to waste time waiting for the elevator, so he ran up the stairs. The moment he appeared, he saw Song Woo sitting there with her back straight. When he saw two streams of tears flowing down Song Woo's beautiful and pale face, and her eyes were filled with sadness, he abruptly stopped in his tracks. He stood there and looked at her quietly. Looking at the side of her face, she looked so sad, so helpless, and so lonely. His heart suddenly felt a sharp pain. She clenched her fists tightly as she tried to suppress the pain in her heart. His eyes, which were as gentle as peach blossoms, were now filled with undisguised shock. Suddenly, he really wanted to go forward and hug her, to give her some warmth and safety. But he still restrained himself. After a long while, he tried very hard to calm his emotions and lifted his slender legs to come forward. He sat down beside Song Woo and handed her a handkerchief. A handkerchief suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Song Woo was stunned. She slowly turned her head and looked at the owner of the handkerchief. Magoo smiled at her and said casually, "Wipe your tears. You're crying so hard that your snot is about to flow out." "Thank you." Song Woo took the handkerchief and wiped the tears on her face. A hint of pain quickly flashed through Magoo's eyes. He looked at Song Woo and said, "Aho will be fine." "I hope so." Song Woo's voice was a little hoarse. Magoo looked at her deeply for a few seconds, then looked away from her face. He glanced at the crying parents of the little girl and the other families of the wounded and asked, "Haven't they come out yet?" "No." As soon as Song Woo's voice fell, the door of the operating room for the little girl opened. Song Woo looked up. The little girl's parents rushed up. The man grabbed the doctor's arm and asked anxiously, "How is my daughter?" The doctor told him painfully, "The bullet hit her heart. We did our best." Chapter 235. The man's hand trembled and he was shocked. Soon, his bearded face was filled with pain. "What?" The little girl's mother suddenly screamed and fell to the ground, crying loudly. "My precious daughter," sob. "Mommy shouldn't have thrown you down to get the car." When Song Woo heard the news, her heart trembled in pain. The tears that had just stopped overflowed again because of the little girl's departure. The little girl was so beautiful. She was innocent. She was gone just like that. "It's all your fault." The little girl's mother suddenly pointed at Song Woo. Her painful gaze instantly turned ferocious. "It's you. You're the one who killed my only daughter." Song Woo looked at the woman with some heartache. After the woman finished speaking, she staggered to her feet and pounced on Song Woo. Magoo's eyes darkened. He stretched out his arm and protected Song Woo behind him. He blocked the woman and looked at her sternly. "The child is gone. I understand your pain, but you can't blame Woo. She didn't want to." The woman screamed and cried, "She killed my daughter. I'm sorry." Song Woo rarely apologized like this. Her voice was choked with sobs. She walked out from behind Magoo and faced the woman calmly. "I'm sorry that this happened. This is not what I wanted to see. I can understand the pain of losing a child, but all I can do now is compensate you." "Compensate me?" The woman cried and shouted, "Compensate me for what? Can you bring my daughter back to life?" Song Woo said guiltily and heavily, "I'm not a god. I really can't bring your daughter back to life. I'll compensate you with 5 million. I've tried my best." When the woman heard 5 million, she was stunned. Then, she fell back to the ground and cried bitterly. She no longer attacked Song Woo. The man's eyes flashed when he heard 5 million. He looked at Song Wuyo with a complicated expression. When the other family members of the injured heard that Song Wuyo would compensate the little girl's parents with 5 million yuan, they also rushed forward to ask for compensation. Song Wuyo was in a bit of a dilemma. She had made a cheongsam for Ji Er's wife and received 5 million yuan, 5 million for each injury. Magoo looked deeply at the family members and said in a low voice. When the family members heard that there was a compensation of 5 million yuan, they obediently kept quiet. Magoo looked at the little girl's mother. We were the ones who caused you to lose your daughter. We are deeply sorry and very sad. The dead cannot come back to life. You are still young. I hope you can pull yourself together. I will compensate you with 5 million. Together with Wuyo's 5 million, you can get 10 million in compensation. Upon hearing this number, the little girl's mother stopped crying. She looked up at Magoo in shock. Song Wuyo also looked at Magoo in surprise. Didn't this mean that he had to fork out a lot of money? Magoo turned around and looked at her comfortingly. Don't be sad. I will arrange for someone to investigate this matter with Ade. Once we catch the culprit, we will definitely bring him to justice. Then the compensation, Magoo smiled indifferently. Don't look down on me for rearing sheep. I earn more than ho. Click, the door of another operating theater opened. Song Wuyo and Magoo looked over. It was Gu Yanhao's operating theater. Magoo subconsciously pulled Song Wuyo's hand and walked quickly to the doctor. Song Wuyo frowned and withdrew her hand from Magoo's. Magoo only realized that he had pulled her hand. He was shocked. In his hand, there seemed to be Song Wuyo's warmth and that soft feeling. Chapter 236. Doctor, how's my husband's injury? Song Wuyo asked anxiously. The bullet has been removed. Fortunately, it didn't hit any vital parts. It's not a big deal. The doctor took off his mask and said. When Song Wuyo heard that, her hanging heart finally relaxed. Gu Yanhao was transferred to the VIP ward. Given his prideful personality, he definitely did not want to be hospitalized. He wanted to maintain a strong and imposing image in front of Song Wuyo. However, under the pressure of Magoo and Song Wuyo, he could barely stay in the hospital for 2 days. However, he was really weak because he had lost too much blood. His face was not pale, but his lips were a little pale. He leaned against the head of the bed and looked at Magoo with a gloating expression. Magoo had been laughing until now because he did not want to stay in the hospital. If you laugh again, get out. He could laugh as much as he wanted outside. This is the first time I've seen such a weak side of you. Magoo pursed his lips and joked. Do you want to take a photo as a souvenir? Gu Yanhao looked at him dangerously. Of course. Did he dare? Gu Yanhao chose to ignore this bad friend of his. He looked down at Song Wuyo who was sitting in front of the bed. Seeing that she did not look too good, he asked in a deep voice, Are you worried about me? When Magoo heard that, his smile faded. He blinked and looked at Song Wuyo. Song Wuyo glared at Gu Yanhao. I'm not worried or distressed. Gu Yanhao chuckled. You don't mean what you say. Your eyes are red. You must have cried. That's because I couldn't sleep. My eyes are red because I'm sleepy. If you don't know how to lie, don't say it. Gu Yanhao frowned. He endured the pain and raised his hand to cover her little hand gently. I know you're worried about me. She could feel his warmth on the back of her hand. Song Wuyo looked at him faintly. Then why did you ask? I want you to say it yourself. She was not going to tell him. Are you scared? Gu Yanhao asked. Afraid of what? What was he referring to? I'll die. Song Wuyo's heart clenched. Of course she was afraid. She pursed her lips and did not answer Gu Yanhao directly. Instead, she looked at his wound and asked, "Does it hurt a lot?" Although she didn't admit it herself, Gu Yanhao could still see the answer he wanted from her face. He smiled faintly and raised his arm, placing it on her neck and rubbing it gently. Song Wuyo looked at him quietly and did not reject him. "It doesn't hurt." He looked at her gently. "Your expression tells me that you're worried about me. You're afraid that I'll die." Was her expression that obvious? She glared at him. "Do you have to say it?" Gu Yanhao smiled. She still loved him as much as before. "Stupid woman, I won't leave you behind," Gu Yanhao said in a low voice. "As long as you're alive, I'll be alive. I won't leave you behind and let you live alone." Song Wuyo's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, she recalled how Dongfang Xian said that he wouldn't let her live alone. Her heart started to ache. Gu Yanhao's eyes flickered. "From now on, I won't let you experience the feeling of being alone and helpless." Song Wuyo was stunned and looked at him blankly. Dongfang Xian's face and his face kept intersecting in front of her eyes, causing her to feel a little confused. Gu Yanhao's gaze was deep and distant as he looked at Song Wuyo and said softly, "I'll definitely not let you live alone." "Ah." Song Wuyo's heart suddenly ached. Before the operation, she had already recalled the scene of Dongfang Xian getting shot by the arrow. It was so painful that she couldn't breathe. After hearing Gu Yanhao's words, she could no longer control her emotions as she suddenly sprawled on the edge of the bed and burst into tears. Gu Yanhao and Migu. Chapter 237. Ah. Ah. Song Wuyo was sobbing uncontrollably. Gu Yanhao was a little confused. Was it because of what he had just said that she was deeply touched? He had moved this woman to tears. Wasn't she lying on top of him and hugging him as she cried? Why, was she lying on the edge of the bed and crying? Could it be that the edge of the bed was more comfortable than his body? Migu pursed his thin lips tightly as he looked at Song Wuyo with heartache. Song Wuyo's cries were a kind of tragic venting. Thinking of her sad expression in the operating room, Migu felt a long pain in his heart. He had tried his best to hide this pain, but because it was too painful, he couldn't hide it. "Stupid woman, don't cry." Gu Yanhao lifted his hand and patted Song Wuyo's back gently. When he looked up and saw the look in Migu's eyes, his hand that was patting Song Wuyo's back paused for a moment. His long and narrow pitch-black eyes deepened by several degrees. He lowered his gaze and looked at Song Wuyo. Migu's gaze made him feel dangerous. Migu had already, Gu Yanhao and Song Wuyo slept in the ward. When they woke up, it was already past 11 o'clock a.m. the next day. Migu told them that food would be delivered to the ward in a while. Before the food arrived, Ade arrived. Ade looked at Gu Yanhao with a grave expression. When Gu Yanhao saw his expression, he could roughly guess what had happened. He glanced at Song Wuyo, who was peeling an apple, and then looked at Ade coolly. "Say it." The assailant confessed that Mrs. Song bribed him with a high price to do this to young madam, Ade said. Song Wuyo paused and looked up at Ade in surprise. Mrs. Song. Yang Yuhui actually hated her to this extent. Gu Yanhao's eyes narrowed dangerously, his gaze cold and malicious. Ade nodded at Song Wuyo. Yes. The perpetrator is a professional killer. Song Wuyo frowned slightly and looked at Gu Yanhao. Gu Yanhao looked at her deeply, then said to Ade, "Send someone to keep an eye on Yang Yuhui. Don't let her leave the country." "Ade, I've already sent people to keep an eye on her 24/7. The culprits have been detained by us, and Yang Yuhui can't contact them." Those self-righteous people all died under young master's gun. Yang Yuhui thought that she had silenced them. Today, she's playing cards with her friends. Gu Yanhao's gaze became more and more sinister. Let her enjoy herself for 2 days. After Gu Yanhao ate the lunch Migu brought over, he forced himself to be discharged. While Song Wuyo wasn't in the ward, Migu said to Gu Yanhao, "Ah ho, your injuries are quite serious. You shouldn't walk too much, lest you tear open your wound." However, Gu Yanhao insisted and looked at Migu coldly. "You must be discharged today. Are you in a hurry to deal with Yang Yuhui?" Migu asked. Gu Yanhao narrowed his eyes and looked at Migu. "You found out too?" Migu nodded calmly. Gu Yanhao asked, "Are you planning to kill Yang Yuhui in private?" Migu pursed his lips and didn't answer. Gu Yanhao asked again, "Why did you kill Song Jiumei behind my back?" When Migu heard this, he was slightly stunned. Ah Ho had found out. But soon, his lips curled up coldly, and his smile was a little bloodthirsty. He was like a vampire, completely different from the usual gentle and sloppy Migu. "She deserves to die." These 3 cold words came out of his mouth, containing a thick murderous aura. Gu Yanhao's sharp eyes looked straight at him. "In your heart, how can she deserve to die? She didn't do anything to hurt you or Mushin. She only did something to hurt Wuyo. Do you think she deserves to die?" Chapter 238. Don't you think she deserves to die? Migu looked at Gu Yanhao. Gu Yanhao's eyes were extremely sinister. "Of course she deserves to die. If it weren't for Wuyo, I would have shot her. Wuyo is my wife. Song Jiumei hurt my wife, so of course I have to punish her. What about you? Why do you hate Song Jiumei so much that after giving her rotten medicine, you spent so much effort to create those fake photos to make the whole country think that Song Jiumei died of syphilis?" Migu did not know how to answer Gu Yanhao, so he chose to remain silent. "What you did was to avenge Wuyo. When you heard Song Jiumei shouting at Wuyo that she would still try to harm her after 30 years, you silenced her so that she would not have the chance to harm Wuyo again." Migu's eyes flashed. That was indeed the case. "This time, are you planning to kill Yang Yuhui for Wuyo's safety again?" Gu Yanhao's words hit Migu's heart. Migu looked at Gu Yanhao coldly. "Yang Yuhui deserves to die." Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows. "They deserve to die, but shouldn't I be the one to deal with them?" Migu looked at Gu Yanhao deeply. "Migu, Wuyo is my wife. I will protect her." Migu's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. "Yes, Wuyo is my wife." Suddenly, Migu smiled evilly. His eyes flickered, and they were as black as stars. "Ah ho, you don't think I like your wife, do you?" Gu Yanhao's expression was cold as he looked at him indifferently. "Isn't that so?" Migu laughed and said rudely, "What do you think I am? We are good brothers. As the saying goes, you can't bully your friend's wife. Then explain why you killed Song Jiumei behind my back." "I wanted to test the effect of the rotten medicine. Song Jiumei was the best candidate." He was lying. Gu Yanhao raised his eyebrows and looked at Migu suspiciously. Migu pursed his lips. His smile wasn't serious at all. It was very mischievous. "What about Yang Yuhui?" Migu was surprised. "Yang Yuhui? I didn't do anything to her." "But you found out that she hired an assassin to kill Wuyo, didn't you?" Migu sighed. "I did it for you. My friend was attacked on the street. As a friend, shouldn't I investigate the matter? Who knew that the other party didn't want to kill you, but your wife's life? Ah how, don't forget that your wife is also my friend." Gu Yanhao sneered with a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. Gu shrugged. You can misunderstand that I like Wuyo, but you can't misunderstand that Wuyo likes me. Gu Yanhao's mocking smile became more obvious. Wuyo isn't blind. Didn't she compare him to Gu in front of the reporters last time? Pfft, as if I'm bad. I'm obviously more handsome than you. You can go back to your ranch now. Gu Yanhao didn't give Gu any face. Gu raised his eyebrows. Are you really leaving the hospital? Of course. Didn't you promise Wuyo to stay for 2 days? It's only been a day. Shut up. Gu Yanhao didn't dare tell Grandpa Gu about his injury. After leaving the hospital and returning to the villa, Gu Yanhao lay on the sofa to rest. Because he was injured because of her, Song Wuyo decided to take care of him personally. He said he wanted to eat millet porridge, so Sister Song had made it. He lay on the sofa and looked at Song Wuyo, pretending to be pitiful. My wound hurts when I raise my arm. Feed me. Song Wuyo stood in front of him with the bowl in her hand. She lowered her head and looked at him disdainfully. Chapter 239. Gu Yanhao furrowed his eyebrows. My wound hurts. All right, stop pretending. Song Wuyo sat down beside him. Gu Yanhao placed a hand on her thigh. Song Wuyo was taken aback. She retracted her leg and glared at him. You want to be a hooligan? Gu Yanhao said helplessly, I want to, but my wound won't allow it. Song Wuyo harumphed softly and scooped a spoonful of porridge to his mouth. Eat up. Gu Yanhao looked at her with a faint gaze and opened his mouth to eat the porridge. Song Wuyo felt a little embarrassed by his gaze. She looked at him. Why are you looking at me like that? Gu Yanhao curled his lips and smiled elegantly. I suddenly feel that I'm very blessed. Of course you're blessed. You're rich and powerful. And so handsome. Song Wuyo, thank you. Song Wuyo looked at him curiously. What are you thanking me for? Thank you for pestering me back then so that I could marry you. Song Wuyo was slightly stunned. Gu Yanhao looked at her seriously. Only then did I have the chance to realize how good you are. Song Wuyo lowered her head. Her clear eyes flashed with a hint of complexity. She blinked her eyes and used her long eyelashes to hide the complexity in her eyes. When she looked up again, her eyes were back to their usual indifference and coldness. That little girl's heart was hit and she's dead, she said calmly. She did not tell him at the hospital because she hoped that he could recuperate peacefully. Now, seeing that he had the energy to talk, such a small injury was really not a big deal to him. But, as she felt sorry for his injury and wanted to take care of him, when Gu Yanhao heard that, his eyes narrowed. These assassins really deserve to die. Going to hell is too easy for them. To think that they would commit murder on the streets and hurt so many innocent people. When she thought about how the little girl had died because of her, Song Wuyo's heart felt heavy. She looked at Gu Yanhao. How are you going to deal with Yang Yuhui? Gu Yanhao asked her, what do you want to do with it? Isn't it a life for a life? Wasn't that the modern law? You want to send her to prison and get shot? Song Wuyo said sadly, that little girl is so beautiful. When she grows up, she will definitely be a beautiful woman. Gu Yanhao looked at her deeply. Yang Yuhui's fate will definitely satisfy you. Song Wuyo helplessly smiled as a trace of sadness flashed through her eyes. This stepmother of mine is really ruthless to me. With the original owner's IQ, he should have been killed by Yang Yuhui long ago. When Gu Yanhao heard this, his heart sank. He smiled and deliberately grabbed her thigh. In the future, if anyone is mean to you, I'll help you fight back. Song Woo-yo moved her body and pushed his hand away. She rolled her eyes at him. Just talk. Why are you grabbing me? Oh, it hurts. After being pushed by her, Gu Yenhao's body fell onto the sofa. His thick black brows were furrowed as he looked at Song Woo-yo with a pained expression. Song Woo-yo looked at him coldly. Go on, keep pretending. Gu Yenhao's brows were furrowed even tighter. It really hurts. Eat it yourself. Song Woo-yo placed the bowl on the coffee table and wanted to leave. No. Gu Yenhao sat up suddenly and reached out to grab her wrist. SSS. His movements were too fast and pulled at his wound, causing Gu Yenhao to gasp in pain. He raised his head and looked deeply at Song Woo-yo with furrowed brows. Hey, my wound really hurts. To be able to use so much strength to grab me, you. It's bleeding. The moment she caught sight of Gu Yenhao's navy blue shirt stained with blood, Song Woo-yo panicked. Chapter 240. It really hurts. Gu Yenhao looked at Song Woo-yo pitifully. Song Woo-yo hurriedly said to Su Jing, Su Jing, get the first aid kit. Oh, okay. Su Jing seemed to have snapped out of her daze as she hurriedly turned around to get the first aid kit. Song Woo-yo sat down again and frowned slightly. She glared at Gu Yenhao reproachfully. Don't you know that you have injuries on your body? Why are you still moving? Gu Yenhao looked at her innocently. Who asked you not to feed me? You. Song Woo-yo was infuriated by Gu Yenhao's behavior. She still liked the cold side of him. Today, his behavior was like a little boy, a childish little boy. Gu Yenhao spread out his arms. The smile in his eyes was obvious as his perfect lips curled up high. Help me unbutton it. He said shamelessly. Song Woo-yo had wanted to help him unbutton his shirt to check on his wounds. However, when she met with those charming eyes of his, she retracted her hands and glared at him fiercely. Unbutton it yourself. It hurts. The wound hurts, but it won't hurt on both hands. It hurts. My entire body hurts. Looking at his pitiful and comical expression, Song Woo-yo really wanted to laugh. She pursed her lips. Gu Yenhao, you're getting more and more shameless. Gu Yenhao reached out and held her little hand. That's because I care about you more and more. Song Woo-yo's heart skipped a beat. She retracted her hand and glared at him fiercely. Didn't you say that your entire body hurts? Why are you holding my hand? I think you're not in enough pain. I really want to use my 2 fingers to poke your wounds. Gu Yenhao looked at her fierce yet cute look and chuckled softly. His mood was inexplicably good. When other women were fierce, they really looked fierce. When she was fierce, she actually had a valiant heroic spirit that could make people obey her. Poke, poke, I'll let you poke. Gu Yenhao even puffed out his chest. His shirt was stained with even more bloodstains. Song Woo-yo stomped her foot. Stop fooling around. Wasn't he afraid that the wound would get infected? Gu Yenhao smirked. I'm not messing around. Miss, here you are. Su Jing took the medicine box and put it on the coffee table. She glanced at Gu Yenhao and saw that he was looking at Song Woo-yo with a gentle smile. She smiled and decided not to be a third wheel. She went into the kitchen to help Sister Gu Yenhao. Young Master Gu is treating Miss better and better, hee, sit tight. I'll help you take off your clothes. Song Woo-yo stared at Gu Yenhao. Gu Yenhao nodded his head obediently. Okay. He leaned against the sofa and looked at Song Woo-yo faintly. Song Woo-yo leaned forward and reached out. She was afraid that she would hurt his wound and gently unbuttoned his shirt. Her face was getting fairer and fairer. Fair and transparent, rosy like a peach. He really wanted to take a bite. Gu Yanhao looked at her intently. Her long and curly eyelashes fluttered as she blinked. They were like an ink fan, extremely beautiful. Song Weo. He called out her name softly. His voice was low and sexy. When his magnetic voice rang in her ears, Song Weo's heartstrings seemed to have been tugged gently. It was as though someone had poked the softest part of her heart. She raised her eyes and looked at him coldly. That gaze was full of disdain. Gu Yanhao smirked and smiled seductively. Why are you looking at me like that? You're annoying. You love the annoying me. Shut up. Song Weo. The man could not help but call her name again. You're really boring. Chapter 241. Song Weo. Didn't she say that he was bored? He was going to be completely bored. He could call her that if he wanted. Song Weo lowered her head. She glanced at his chest. The buttons were unbuttoned and his shirt was open to both sides. The white gauze that was wrapped around his wound was already red. He must have lost a lot of blood. You tore your wound. Song Weo frowned. This man knew that he was injured, but he still had no sense of propriety. Gu Yanhao lowered his head and looked at his wound indifferently. Will you help me deal with it? Gu Yanhao looked at her and asked. He remembered that once, she fell and scraped her knee. Sand got in and caused a lot of blood. There was a first aid kit in the villa, but she did not know how to deal with it. Of course. Song Weo glared at him and turned around. She opened the first aid kit and took out a pair of sterilized scissors. When she turned around, Gu Yanhao's teasing eyes suddenly became very deep. She had really changed. She was completely different from her past self. Song Weo took the scissors and cut the gauze that was wrapped around his chest. Gu Yanhao looked at her. Shouldn't you open it layer by layer? Her action of cutting the gauze was swift and without hesitation. Song Weo snorted coldly. It's wrapped so thickly around your armpits. When will you be done? She might as well cut it off and save time. After cutting the gauze, Song Weo carefully removed the gauze that was covered with blood and had become sticky. Fortunately, she had sprinkled a lot of medicinal powder on the wound when she bandaged it. It was not to the extent that the gauze was stuck to the flesh of the wound and was difficult to remove. After removing the gauze, a hole appeared in front of her eyes. Song Weo was surprised. Why didn't you suture it? Sutures will leave an ugly scar. If you don't suture the wound, it won't be ugly after it heals, Gu Yanhao said. When will this kind of wound heal? It was a ghastly sight. Song Weo pursed her lips and glanced at him with disdain. You're a man, why would you care about such an ugly scar? Who would see if I put on my clothes? Some women have cesarean sections, but the scar is ugly. Women who love to be beautiful didn't even care, but a man like him cared. He was simply asking for a beating. Gu Yanhao smiled seductively. You'll see when you take off your clothes. Don't tell me you're going to walk around shirtless outside. No, that's a beast. I don't know why you don't have any stitches. Stitches healed faster. Like I said, the scar will be very ugly. She was speechless. I want to undress in front of you. He was even more speechless now. Gu Yanhao chuckled. I want to show you my perfect figure. Song Weo blushed and glared at him. Stop talking. I'll help you stop the bleeding. Okay. Gu Yanhao obediently shut his mouth again. Song Wuyo first used a pair of pliers and a cotton swab to gently clean up the powder that she had sprinkled earlier. The cleaning process was not easy. If she was not careful, she would hurt the wound. Moreover, the wound was already torn and there was blood flowing out. It was not easy to clean it up like that. However, Song Wuyo, who was fully focused, seemed to be very careful. Her movements were gentle but not slow. It was as if she often did this kind of thing. Gu Yanhao lowered his head and gently raised his eyebrows. He looked at her deeply with a hint of scrutiny. When she saw his terrible wound, she only frowned slightly. She did not feel disgusted or afraid. Her hands did not tremble at all. She was even calmer and more skilled than a doctor who often performed surgery. Song Wuyo, do you often bandage people's wounds? He asked softly. Chapter 242. Yes, when the doctor is too busy or has yet to return to the military camp from the battlefield, I will personally bandage the wounds of the injured soldiers. Dongfang Xian, he. Song Wuyo blurted out. When she came back to her senses, she was stunned. Her movements were stiff as she stared blankly at the pliers in her hands. Just now. What did she say? At the same time, after Gu Yanhao heard what she said, a trace of shock flashed past his dark eyes. There was also a wave of emotions that flashed past him. He looked at her in shock. The muscles on his face tightened because of the shock. His heart seemed to have been hit by a violent wave, causing his whole body to tremble. She mentioned Dongfang Xian again. She mentioned the time when he was in the war. Her current reaction clearly told him that she had unintentionally let the cat out of the bag. Was she as shocked as he was and did not know how to face him next? Gu Yanhao took a deep breath and tried hard to suppress the crazy emotions in his heart. His incomparably deep eyes, after an intense surge of emotions, gradually calmed down. Online game. He raised his eyebrows as if nothing had happened and said in a frivolous tone. Song Wuyo was stunned and her heart trembled violently. She did not look at him immediately but bit her lower lip. Should she confess to him that she was not his wife, Song Wuyo? If she did, would he chase her away immediately? Yes. In the end, she chose to keep it a secret and nodded gently. Gu Yanhao's eyes darkened as he looked at her deeply. After a few seconds, Song Wuyo secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he did not ask what online game it was. She continued to treat his wounds. The atmosphere was not as good as it was earlier. Throughout the treatment, Gu Yanhao pursed his lips tightly and looked at her without blinking. Song Wuyo did not look at him either. Perhaps she was feeling guilty. After about half an hour, the wounds were treated and bandaged. After Song Wuyo was done, she got up and took a glance at him. The millet porridge is cold. I'll get a bowl of hot porridge for you. Gu Yanhao gave her a charming smile. Okay. Song Wuyo took the bowl on the coffee table and walked quickly into the kitchen. Gu Yanhao turned around and looked at her back view. His smile gradually faded and his gaze became deeper. Soon, Song Wuyo came back with a bowl of hot millet porridge. Gu Yanhao's expression suddenly changed, and he looked like a ruffian. Feed me. After I bandaged your wound, it hurts even more. After saying that, she pursed her lips and put on an adorable look. Gu Yanhao, Song Wuyo to act like a 3-year-old child, you're a grown-up to act cute. Gu Yanhao not only acted cute, but also acted coquettishly. I'm really in pain. Pfft. Song Wuyo could not help but burst out laughing. She sat down beside him and played along. I got it. Little brother, be good. Open your mouth and eat the porridge. Yes, be good. When Gu Yanhao heard that, his eyes twitched. Little brother. He opened his mouth and sucked the entire spoon into his mouth. Song Wuyo could not pull it back for a moment. Song Wuyo looked at him in surprise. "You're not going to swallow the spoon, are you?" With the spoon in his mouth, Gu Yanhao looked at her bewitchingly. His eyes were narrowed as he smiled charmingly like a fox. Song Wuyo furrowed her brows. Damn it! What was he looking at her with? A hint of shyness flashed across her beautiful, rosy face. "Little brother," Gu Yanhao mumbled. Song Wuyo's hearing was extremely sharp. No matter how mumbled he was, she could hear him clearly. She glared at him and let go of the spoon. "Aren't you acting cute? Little brother suits you." "No. Young Master Gu, it's not good to act like a hooligan, right? You should ask the readers if they like you acting like a hooligan. Get lost. Do I need the approval of a bunch of little vixens to act like a hooligan to my wife?" Chapter 243. No. Gu Yanhao reached out and took out the spoon. "My little brother is not suitable for me. It's suitable for..." Gu Yanhao looked down at the part of himself that symbolized masculinity and curled his lips evilly. "It." Song Wuyo followed his gaze and looked down. Her face heated up when her gaze landed on him. What a shameless man. Song Wuyo looked up and looked at him coldly. "So, are you going to eat with your mouth or with it?" Gu Yanhao smiled evilly. "Eat you. If I'm going to eat you, of course, with it." When Song Wuyo heard that, she was both embarrassed and angry. Her face turned even redder. "Gu Yanhao, eat it yourself." She stuffed the porridge into Gu Yanhao's hand. "You feed me." Gu Yanhao acted cute again. "Feed your head." Song Wuyo turned around and went upstairs. Men really could not be shameless. When they were shameless, their moral integrity would fall to the ground. Their skin was so thick that they could not even grow a beard. After being shameless in the living room, he was even more shameless in the bedroom. She was sweating. Gu Yanhao actually wanted Song Wuyo to help him bathe. This, Song Wuyo would rather not eat for a week than help him bathe. She resisted with all her might. Gu Yanhao hugged his sleeping robe and stood at the bathroom door, looking at her faintly. "You didn't bathe at the hospital last night. Are you not going to bathe again tonight? Your chest is injured, not your hands. Can't you just bathe yourself? Why must I help you?" When she thought of that scene, Song Wuyo could not even breathe properly. "I'll bathe myself. If the wound in front gets wet, it will get infected with bacteria. If I hook my hand behind my back, won't I tear the wound? As for the lower part, it hurts when I bend down now. Then wait a few days before bathing. By then, the wound would slowly scab and not hurt so much. I'm a clean freak. It was already unbearable for me not to bathe last night." Gu Yanhao said. "I won't help you." Song Wuyo wanted to leave. "Song Wuyo!" Gu Yanhao suddenly shouted at her sternly. Song Wuyo turned around and looked at him coldly. Gu Yanhao's face darkened. "If you don't help me, I'll get Su Jing to help me." Song Wuyo's back stiffened. "I will also strip naked in front of her, and she will see my entire body," Gu Yanhao said coldly. Song Wuyo's eyes dimmed. Gu Yanhao snorted, "If sparks fly during the process, take her as a concubine. Take her as a concubine." Song Wuyo's heart clenched as she looked at Gu Yanhao faintly. It was as if she saw the Dongfang Xian standing together with the Empress again. After building a prosperous palace, Dongfang Xian had more than one concubine. His main wife was the Empress, and she was just a concubine. There were also many concubines in the harem, Gu Yanhao noticed her absent-mindedness and felt her sadness. He looked at her deeply and said seriously, "It's really uncomfortable for me to not bathe for a whole night. My wound is really painful." Song Wuyo looked at him coldly with reddened eyes. "Can you be any more shameless? I'm your husband, and you're my wife. I'm injured because of you. Shouldn't you serve me?" Gu Yanhao said righteously. Yes, his current identity was still her husband. And he was injured because he wanted to save her. Song Wuyo walked over and grabbed his nightgown. She walked past him into the bathroom and said coldly, "Come in." Gu Yanhao smelled the fragrance that belonged to her. He curled his lips and revealed a smug smile. He turned around in a good mood. "Come, wife." Chapter 244. The word wife caused Song Wuyo to stumble and almost slip. She gritted her teeth and scolded him in her heart, "Stinky man." She then placed his sleeping robe on the shelf and turned the cold water to warm. "Warm water?" Gu Yanhao asked. "You don't like warm water?" Song Wuyo turned the warm water back to cold water. Gu Yanhao looked at her ambiguously. "Cold water is better. I'm afraid that warm water won't be able to cool down my body temperature." "You." Song Wuyo wanted to scold him. Suddenly, she looked at his wound and smiled gloatingly. "Warm water, I'll help you wash it. Cold water, you wash it yourself. 2-on-1. Song Wuyo, aren't you afraid that the primal strength in my body will suddenly explode and eat you up?" Gu Yanhao teased. Song Wuyo curled her lips and smiled proudly. "Your primal strength will turn your small wound into a huge one. You might even die the moment it explodes. I'll hold back this terrifying strength of mine for the time being. I'll deal with you after I've recovered." Gu Yanhao raised his hand and knocked heavily on her forehead. "Warm water. Hurry and help me take off my clothes." Song Wuyo rubbed the spot where he had knocked on and said disdainfully, "You only have the strength to hit me, but you don't have the strength to take off my clothes." "No. Take it off, take it off. It's not like I haven't seen his body before." Even though she said that, by the time she had taken off Gu Yanhao's clothes, her face was already as red as a monkey's butt. It felt really uncomfortable. Looking at her red face, Gu Yanhao curled his lips and smiled even more charmingly. She was so beautiful. Song Wuyo tried her best to restrain herself from looking down. Otherwise, she might accidentally glance at him. She took the shower head and went to his back to wash the area outside of the gauze. Outside of the gauze, wasn't it below the buttocks? Song Wuyo felt extremely embarrassed. But on second thought, wasn't it just a man's butt? What was there to be afraid of? What's there to be embarrassed about? She held the shower head in one hand and used the towel in the other to help him wipe his face. Gu Yanhao opened his legs slightly and stood with his legs spread out. His sexy lips curved into a mischievous smile. "I don't need a towel. It's more comfortable to use my hands. If you don't shut up, I won't even use my hands or a towel. I'll just wet it and help you put on your clothes." Song Wuyo warned him. "No." Gu Yanhao smirked. "I'll use a towel then. I haven't washed it for an entire night. Help me wash it clean." Then, he turned around. Song Wuyo, who was bending down to brush against his thigh, felt a flash in front of her eyes, and the scene changed. Just a moment ago, it was still two slender and sexy thighs. How did it suddenly become, although it still had two slender legs, it was black and furry? What was going on? Song Wuyo stared at it for a few seconds, then raised her head and looked at Gu Yanhao in a daze. Gu Yanhao didn't feel anything strange at first, but after she stared at it for a few seconds, it felt as if she had been stroking it for a few minutes. It was originally soft, but it suddenly hardened and clamored in front of Song Wuyo. The light in his eyes became clear and deep as it became firm. You woke it up with just a look. You're really capable. Gu Yanhao smirked, and his voice became low and hoarse. You're being a pervert. Song Wuyo blushed and glared at him. This is a normal reaction. If it doesn't wake up, then it's not normal. Song Wuyo, help it bathe. Gu Yanhao reached out and held her hand that was holding the towel. Her hand was soft, and it felt very comfortable to hold in his palm. You can do it yourself. Do you think Miss Song should help young Master Gu? Ah, this is so evil. Chapter 245. Rub it yourself. Song Wuyo blushed as she glared at Gu Yanhao. It wants you to rub it. Gu Yanhao put her hand there. Song Wuyo tried to pull her hand back, but she could not. This man was forcing her to hold it and rub it. Song Wuyo was furious. Gu Yanhao, aren't you afraid that I'll break it? Gu Yanhao took a deep breath and his eyes were deep. You can't bear to. Song Wuyo smiled coldly. Who said so? I'll do it. After that, Song Wuyo held it tightly and twisted it. Hiss, Gu Yanhao sucked in another breath of relief. Because of the pleasure and the discomfort, his exquisite face was slightly distorted. He held Song Wuyo's hand tightly and did not let her pull it away. His gaze seemed to be scarlet, deep and serene, and also seemed to be unsatisfied with his desires. Song Wuyo wanted to twist it hard, but when she held it tightly, he took a deep breath and she was stunned. Looking at his comfortable and dissatisfied expression, her heart started to beat faster. Gu Yanhao's eyes were blurred. Don't twist it. Rub it. Hold it. Rub it. No. Song Wuyo resisted and pulled her hand away. Gu Yanhao grabbed her wrist tightly and stared at her with dissatisfaction. It's uncomfortable. You solve it yourself. Song Wuyo, you're torturing me. You're the one torturing me. How am I torturing you? Don't tell me you want it. I want your head. Rub it. The sooner you're done, the sooner it's over. The man's voice was so hoarse that Song Wuyo felt it was strange. Song Wuyo stared at him fiercely. She really did not want to rub it, but if she continued to struggle and pull with him, she would hurt the wound again. But she felt it was despicable to rub it. However, there seemed to be a voice in her heart saying, what's despicable about a wife helping her husband to solve his physical needs? I feel so uncomfortable. Gu Yanhao lowered his head and pressed his forehead against Song Wuyo's forehead. His voice was hoarse. Wuyo, help me. Just this once. Song Wuyo's heart was beating wildly. Yes, just this once. Gu Yanhao curled his lips. Just this once. In the future, he would not use her hands. And use her body. Madame Song was dressed fashionably. She carried the branded bag that Song Jiuyue had given her and walked out of the Song family's villa. She made an appointment with the mistress of the neighboring villa to play mahjong. As soon as she walked out of the villa, the phone. Mrs. Song stopped Song, the numbers, it was an unknown number. She wanted to reject the call, but she seemed to have thought of something and picked it up. As soon as she picked up the phone, she heard a man's cold voice. Ms. Yang, why haven't you transferred the rest of the money to my account? Mrs. Song was shocked. You're not dead. Huh, you really want me dead? Mrs. Song looked around sneakily and asked, where are you? Don't ask me where I am. I just want to know when you will transfer the rest of the money to me. Mrs. Song saw that there was no one around, her face darkened. I heard that Song Wuyo is not dead. The man sneered. You want to go back on your words? Mrs. Song said, I will not go back on my words. I want you to take action again and kill Song Wuyo. The man said, I can take action again, but you have to pay. My motto is that regardless of whether the mission is a success or failure, you have to pay the balance. Mrs. Song said, if you kill Song Wuyo, I will pay you. Chapter 246. This time, you forced me to take action on the streets and hurt a lot of innocent people. A little girl even died. Mrs. Song sneered. In your line of work, would you be so soft-hearted and upset over a little girl's death? I took your money to kill someone, which means you killed someone. Don't you feel guilty at all? Mrs. Song spat. What's there to feel guilty about? Isn't it just the death of a daughter? She also lost a daughter. Yang Yuhui, you're really vicious. Suddenly, Song Wuyo's cold voice sounded. Madame Song was startled. She looked around, but there was no one around. She frowned. That's weird. I think I heard that bitch talking just now. Hello, I'm going to play mahjong now. If you want the rest of the money, bring me Song Wuyo's head. Mrs. Song calmed herself down and said loudly to the man on the other end of the phone. Aren't you afraid that your head will fall to the ground first? This time, the voice was colder than before. It was not a man's voice. It was Song Wuyo's voice. Mrs. Song was shocked and quickly turned around. His eyes widened as he stared in horror at Song Wuyo, who was walking out from a big tree. She knew. Song Wuyo walked over step by step. Her eyes were cold. Mrs. Song looked at Song Wuyo and her heart trembled. It was as if she was a demoness who came to take her head. Song Wuyo. Song Wuyo stopped 5 meters away from her and looked at her coldly. Are you disappointed that I'm not dead? Mrs. Song was afraid that the truth was out. However, she cared about her reputation and did not want to show it in front of Song Wuyo. Yes, I'm very disappointed. Mrs. Song glared at Song Wuyo coldly. Song Wuyo's expression was cold. Even if you don't like me, even if I'm not your biological daughter, you don't have to hate me so much that you would hire a hitman to kill me, right? Yang Yuhui, I called you mom when I was young. How can you be so cruel? Pfft. Why would I care about a bitch like you as my daughter? That's right, I hate you. When I found out about you, I hated you to death. Every time I see you, I am reminded of Song Nan's betrayal and infidelity. I want to strangle you. Especially when you married Master Gu. You made me, Zhou Yue, sad. I hate you even more. Even in my dreams, I curse you to die quickly. You're really tough, surviving 2 car accidents. It's fine if you can't die, but why do you want to kill my Jume? I hired assassins to kill you, not because I hate you, but because I want to avenge Jume. Madame Song Wuyo looked at Song Wuyo ferociously. Her eyes were cold, and her expression was twisted. I didn't kill Song Jume. Song Wuyo said. She died of syphilis. Bah. Jume is not that kind of woman. Yang Yuhui, you failed to hire an assassin to kill me, but you killed a little girl and injured 4 people. So what? You killed someone. So what if I killed someone? Song Wuyo sneered. You have to pay with your life for killing someone. Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. Madame Song suddenly pounced on Song Wuyo. At the same time, she took out a small knife from her bag. Song Wuyo dodged the knife before Madame Song could reach her. At this time, a few police officers appeared out of nowhere and stopped Madame Song. Madame Song was shocked and struggled. Let me go. Let me go. Yang Yuhui, we have solid evidence that you killed someone. We will bring you back to the police station now. One of the police officers said. What solid evidence? I didn't kill anyone. It was those useless assassins who killed her. Don't deny it anymore. It's futile no matter how much you deny it. Chapter 247. Mrs. Song seemed to have gone crazy. She kicked and bit the police officers, and she did not forget to pounce on Song Wuyo. She looked like a lion that was about to eat a person. Song Wuyo, you killed Jiumei. You'll die a horrible death. Mrs. Song Wuyo screamed at Song Wuyo as she struggled. The commotion outside attracted Song Nan out of the villa. Song Nan was shocked when he saw the police officers holding his wife. He rushed forward and looked at the police in confusion. What's going on? Song Nan's heart skipped a beat when he realized that Song Wuyo was also there. He looked at Mrs. Song sharply. Did this woman cause trouble again? Yang Yuhui hired a killer. We have solid evidence. We're taking her to the police station, one of the police officers said to Song Nan. Song Nan's expression changed drastically. What? He stared at Mrs. Song in disbelief. You hired a killer. Kill. Before he could finish his sentence, Song Nan suddenly understood. He pointed at Song Wuyo and stared at Mrs. Song. You hired a killer to kill Wuyo. Mrs. Song shouted at him, can't I? She killed my Jiumei. I'm avenging her. You're crazy. Song Nan clenched his fist and wanted to punch Mrs. Song's face. Jiumei died of syphilis. Mrs. Song's eyes were bloodshot. Pfft. Do you think I don't know my daughter? Jiumei wouldn't get syphilis outside. Don't mess around here if you don't have evidence. Take her back. The police officer said. Let me go. You can't arrest me. The police officer was amused. You killed someone. Can't we arrest you? Do you think you're the king? I wanted to kill Song Wuyo. Now, Song Wuyo is still alive and standing here. I failed to kill her. A 10-year-old girl is dead, and a 30-year-old mother is still unconscious in the hospital. You call that failed to kill her? The police officer sneered. Let me go. Let me go. Mrs. Song struggled with all her might, refusing to get into the police car. But was it useful? Under the police's forceful escort, she was stuffed into the police car. Soon, the police car sped away. Song Nan stood there in a daze, his mind completely blank. His wife was arrested for murder. The evidence was conclusive. Song Nan suddenly raised his head and looked at Song Wuyo, who was standing there coldly. Wuyo, his voice was trembling. He wasn't worried that Mrs. Song would be arrested. He was worried that his Song Corporation would be finished after this incident. Song Wuyo looked at Song Nan coldly. A life for a life. You have to be mentally prepared. Song Nan said anxiously, can't you plead for your mother? Song Wuyo curled her lips coldly. My mother wouldn't try to kill me time and time again. I'm here to provide evidence, not to plead for mercy. For Dad's sake, spare your mother. Song Nan stepped forward, his footsteps heavy and trembling. Hee. Song Wuyo sneered, let her go and wait for her to have another chance to harm me. Wuyo, Dad, Song Wuyo looked at Song Nan expressionlessly. I'm here to sever our father-daughter relationship. Song Nan trembled and looked at Song Wuyo in shock. What did she say? Song Wuyo said coldly, in the future, don't say that you're my father in front of me." He knew that Yang Yuhui was going to kill her, but he still wanted her to plead for mercy. Such a father really made her bitterly disappointed. After saying that, Song Wuyo turned and left resolutely. Song Nan stood there in a daze, his eyes full of anxiety. When he thought of the Song Corporation, he broke out in a cold sweat. Song Wuyo was going to sever their father-daughter relationship. His only chance to save the Song Corporation was gone. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.